The genesis of Rome, shrouded not in the dry annals of verifiable history, but in the shimmering tapestry of myth and legend, is a story born of divine parentage and mortal peril. Roman tradition, rich with poetic truth, recounts the birth of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. Their mother was Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin, whose sacred vow of chastity was broken by none other than the war god Mars himself. Fearing these divinely blessed, and therefore potentially dangerous children, a jealous king, Amulius, who had usurped his brother Numitor's throne, ordered the infants drowned in the mighty Tiber River. Yet fate, it seems, had other plans. The river, a silent accomplice to destiny, refused to claim them, instead carrying their basket gently downstream, depositing them on the marshy banks at the very spot where Rome, the eternal city, would one day rise. It was there, in a shadowy den on the slopes of the Palatine Hill, that a she-wolf, a creature of wild instinct and surprising maternal warmth, discovered the abandoned babes. With a nurturing tenderness that defied her predatory nature, she suckled them with her milk, sustaining their fragile lives. Their serendipitous rescue was completed when a shepherd named Faustulus, stumbling upon the remarkable scene, took them home to his wife, Acca Laurentia, and together they raised the boys as their own sons, unaware of their royal lineage. As Romulus and Remus matured into formidable young men, displaying an innate leadership and martial prowess, whispers of their true heritage reached their ears. Stirred by the revelations, they resolved to found a new city, a lasting monument on the sacred banks where their lives had been miraculously spared. However, the foundational act was marred by discord. The brothers quarreled fiercely over omens and the precise location of their nascent settlement. In a moment of tragic passion, one that would echo through the tumultuous history of the city, they sought to create. Romulus, fueled by ambition and perceived slight, struck down Remus. Thus, Romulus became the sole founder, his hands stained with the blood of his kin, forever linking Rome's beginnings with fratricide. Standing atop the Palatine Hill, a site chosen for its strategic vantage, Romulus, in the ritualistic manner of his time, marked the sacred boundaries of his nascent city with a plow. This pivotal moment, dating to the year we now recognize as 753 BCE, would become the very anchor from which Romans would reckon their entire history, the Urbe Condita, from the founding of the city. In its infancy, Rome was a humble affair, little more than a scattering of thatched huts perched precariously above the Tiber, a vulnerable collection of dwellings hemmed in by the formidable Etruscan cities to the north and the sophisticated Greek colonies to the south. To bolster his fledgling community, Romulus adopted a pragmatic, if unconventional, strategy. He declared the city a sanctuary, offering asylum to outlaws, exiles, and dispossessed individuals from all the surrounding territories. This rapid influx of men, however, quickly created an unforeseen problem: a severe shortage of women. Romulus, ever resourceful, devised an audacious solution, leading to the infamous episode known as the Rape of the Sabine Women. He invited the neighboring Sabine people to a grand festival, a celebration ostensibly dedicated to Neptune. In the midst of the festivities, at a prearranged signal, the Roman men violently abducted the Sabine daughters, claiming them as brides. This act of calculated aggression led to war, but ultimately, through the intervention of the very women who had been abducted, a peace treaty was forged, integrating the Sabines into the burgeoning Roman state and laying the groundwork for its foundational social fabric. For nearly 2.5 centuries following the legendary founding by Romulus, Rome embarked on its regal era, guided by a succession of kings. 7 monarchs, in total, presided over this foundational period, slowly but surely transforming the modest collection of villages into a significant regional power. Each king left an indelible mark, shaping the city's destiny in profound ways. After the warrior founder Romulus, the people chose Numa Pompilius, a man whose reign stood in stark contrast to his predecessors. Numa is remembered as a wise and deeply pious ruler, whose profound influence established many of Rome's enduring religious traditions and institutions. Guided, it was said, by the nymph Egeria, his legendary consort, Numa instituted the office of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, a position of immense spiritual authority that would endure for over 1,000 years. He also established the sacred Temple of Janus, a powerful symbol whose doors were famously closed only in times of profound peace, a rare and often fleeting occurrence in the annals of Roman history. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, marked a return to martial vigor. Known for his aggressive military campaigns, he expanded Roman territory through relentless warfare, most notably against the venerable city of Alba Longa, Rome's ancestral mother city. Under his rule, Rome absorbed the Alban population after their defeat, establishing a crucial pattern of assimilation that would become a hallmark of Roman statecraft throughout its empire. This era also gave rise to the legendary combat between the Horatiae and Curiatii triplets, representing Rome and Alba Longa respectively, a symbolic battle that, through single combat, decided the fate of both cities without resorting to a full-scale war, a testament to a blend of honor and brutality. Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, focused on infrastructure and strategic expansion. He oversaw the construction of Rome's first bridge across the Tiber, the Pons Sublicius, a wooden structure of immense practical and symbolic importance. More significantly, he founded the port city of Ostia at the mouth of the Tiber, creating a vital maritime gateway that would eventually connect landlocked Rome to the vast trade networks of the Mediterranean world. He also expanded the city's boundaries to include the formidable Janiculum Hill, providing a crucial defensive stronghold for the rapidly growing settlement. With the fifth king, Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, Rome experienced a profound infusion of Etruscan influence, signaling a shift towards a more sophisticated urban culture. A highly ambitious and innovative ruler, Tarquinius Priscus initiated grand public works that transformed Rome's landscape. He began the monumental construction of the great temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, dedicated to the Capitoline triad of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, which would become the heart of Roman state religion. He also established the Circus Maximus, a massive arena for exhilarating chariot races and public spectacles, laying the foundation for Rome's future entertainment spectacles. Crucially, under his reign, the massive drainage project of the Cloaca Maxima commenced, an engineering marvel that began to transform the swampy valley between the hills into what would eventually become the iconic Roman Forum, the bustling center of civic and commercial life. Servius Tullius, the sixth king, is celebrated as a brilliant reformer and organizer. He implemented Rome's first comprehensive constitution, a revolutionary system that divided citizens into distinct classes based on their wealth and, crucially, their military capability. This meticulously structured organization, known as the Centuriate Assembly, became fundamental to both Roman military conscription and political life for centuries to come, determining voting power and military obligations. Servius also undertook the monumental task of constructing the first true defensive wall around the entire city, a formidable rampart that famously encompassed all 7 of Rome's legendary hills: the Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Celian, solidifying Rome's identity as a unified urban entity. The final king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, tragically brought the era of monarchy to an ignominious close. Though his reign saw impressive building projects, including the completion of the magnificent Temple of Jupiter, his rule was defined by unchecked arrogance and brutal cruelty, alienating the powerful Roman nobility and common citizens alike. The breaking point, a story forever etched in Roman memory, came with the heinous act committed by his son, Sextus Tarquinius, who raped Lucretia, a virtuous and deeply respected Roman noblewoman. Lucretia, unable to bear the shame, took her own life after revealing her violation. This unspeakable outrage sparked a furious rebellion, ignited by Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's grieving husband, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus. In 509 BCE, the monarchy was decisively overthrown. Tarquin and his despised family were driven into exile, and from the ashes of tyranny, the Roman Republic was gloriously born. This revolutionary new system of government, meticulously designed to prevent the dangerous concentration of power in any single individual, would not only chart the course of Rome's future, but also profoundly influence political thought and constitutional governance for millennia to come. Looking back at this foundational period, we can discern the nascent elements that would define Rome's enduring character. From its earliest mythical beginnings, Rome displayed a remarkable adaptability, an almost insatiable capacity to absorb and integrate influences from its more established neighbors, the sophisticated Etruscans and the cultured Greeks, while simultaneously forging its own distinct and formidable identity. The early Romans, a hardy people of farmers and warriors, established enduring traditions of rigorous military discipline, unparalleled practical engineering, and a nascent legal organization that would serve as the unshakable foundations for their monumental empire. The small city that began as a humble cluster of villages organically expanded to encompass multiple settlements across its iconic 7 hills, all connected by winding paths that would eventually evolve into the famous paved streets of Rome. By the close of the monarchical era, the population had swelled to an impressive 35,000 souls, making it one of the largest and most dynamic cities in central Italy, though still a modest prelude to the colossal metropolis it would ultimately become. Roman society in this formative period was meticulously organized around the family, with the paterfamilias, the male head of the household, wielding nearly absolute authority, the patria potestas over all his dependents, including his wife, children, and slaves. Religious observance was not merely a matter of faith but a meticulous civic duty, a pragmatic contract with the divine. Romans believed fervently that proper rituals and precise adherence to religious law maintained the pax deorum, the sacred peace with the gods, which was deemed absolutely essential for the city's prosperity, stability, and very survival. As one drifts deeper into the currents of history, it is easy to envision these early Romans, sturdy farmers tilling the fertile plains, disciplined warriors honing their skills, devout priests interpreting the omens, and skilled craftsmen shaping the city's early infrastructure, all laying the painstaking groundwork for what would forever be known as the Eternal City. From such simple, often brutal, beginnings on the banks of the Tiber, Rome would eventually stretch its unparalleled influence across 3 continents, establishing an empire unlike any the world had ever witnessed. But that awe-inspiring expansion was still a distant horizon. For now, as the kings departed from the stage of history, Rome stood poised at the threshold of its Republican era, ready to embark on the path to greatness that would make its name immortal. As the last tyrannical king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, fled ignominiously into exile, the Roman people stood on the cusp of a truly momentous new era. The monarchy, which had guided the nascent city's initial growth and transformation, was gone, violently replaced by a bold and untested experiment in governance. This new system, the Roman Republic, would profoundly shape the destiny of Rome for the ensuing 5 centuries, setting a precedent for political thought that reverberates even today. The very design of the newly established republic was a direct response to the abuses of Tarquinius Superbus, meticulously crafted to prevent the dangerous concentration of power that had led to tyranny. 2 annually elected magistrates, known as consuls, replaced the king, each wielding supreme executive and military authority. Yet crucially, each possessed the power to veto the other's decisions. This ingenious system ensured a fundamental check on power, guaranteeing that no single individual could dominate Roman politics or become an absolute ruler. Standing as a venerable advisory body behind these consuls was the Senate, a council of elders predominantly drawn from the most influential noble families. While the Senate initially lacked formal legislative power, its accumulated wisdom and moral authority meant its advice carried enormous weight, effectively steering the ship of state. However, the early republic faced immediate and formidable threats to its very existence. The exiled king, Tarquin, tirelessly sought allies among neighboring cities, attempting to reclaim his lost throne. Most notably, the powerful Etruscan lord Lars Porsena, king of Clusium, laid siege to Rome, pushing the young republic to the brink. It was during this desperate period that Roman legend shines brightest, the heroic tale of Horatius Cockles. Single-handedly, he famously held the Pons Sublicius, the only bridge across the Tiber, against the entire Etruscan army while his comrades desperately destroyed it behind him, saving the city from imminent capture and embodying the spirit of Roman valor. Rome's internal politics, however, proved as challenging and contentious as its external enemies. The Republic was initially dominated by the patricians, a hereditary aristocratic class who controlled both political and religious institutions, jealously guarding their privileges. The vast majority of citizens, known as plebeians, found themselves systematically excluded from power, often trapped in crippling debt bondage to wealthy patrician landowners, creating a deep-seated social divide. This simmering tension between the two orders, patricians and plebeians, would shape the tumultuous landscape of Roman politics for centuries, a perennial struggle for equality and justice. The first major social crisis, a pivotal moment in the plebeian struggle, erupted when the plebeian soldiers, the very backbone of Rome's military might, withdrew en masse from the city to the Sacred Mount. This drastic action, effectively history's first recorded general strike, brought Rome to a standstill and forced the patricians to concede. The result was the creation of the office of tribune of the plebs, powerful magistrates specifically tasked with protecting plebeian interests and possessing the crucial power to veto legislation deemed harmful to their order. Tribunes were declared sacrosanct, meaning anyone who physically harmed them faced both religious condemnation and the penalty of death, underscoring their inviolability. The next significant development came with the creation of the 12 Tables, Rome's foundational written law code. Publicly posted in the forum for all citizens to see and consult, these laws brought unprecedented transparency to what had previously been secretive and often arbitrary legal procedures controlled solely by the patricians. Though the 12 Tables still favored the elite in many respects, they represented a crucial step toward greater equality under the law and irrevocably established the principle that laws should be public knowledge, accessible and applicable to all citizens. As Rome gradually resolved these pressing internal challenges, it concurrently embarked on a steady, often brutal, expansion of its influence throughout central Italy. The city engaged in numerous wars against its formidable neighbors, the Volsci, the Equi, the Sabines, and most significantly, the advanced Etruscans. The decisive conquest of the wealthy Etruscan city of Veii, located a mere 12 miles to the north, dramatically doubled the territory under Roman control, providing valuable land and resources. However, this expansion suffered a devastating setback when, in 390 BCE, Celtic Gauls, fierce warriors from beyond the Alps, decisively defeated the Roman army at the Tiber River and proceeded to sack Rome itself. Most of the city lay in ruins, though a tenacious group of defenders held out heroically on the fortified Capitoline Hill. Legend has it that the sacred geese in the Temple of Juno, with their noisy alarms, warned the Romans of a surprise night attack, thereby saving the citadel. The Gauls eventually withdrew after receiving a humiliating ransom of gold, but the traumatic memory of this disaster, known as the Gallic sack, would remain a profound scar on Roman consciousness for centuries, fueling a deep-seated fear of northern invaders. Remarkably, Rome rebounded swiftly and with astonishing resilience from this catastrophe. The city was rebuilt, fortified with stronger, more extensive walls, a testament to its indomitable spirit. Within decades, Rome had defeated the powerful Latin League, incorporating these culturally related peoples into its rapidly expanding state. Some Latin communities received full Roman citizenship, enjoying all rights and privileges, while others were granted partial rights, often without the right to vote. This ingenious system of graduated citizenship and varying legal rights became a hallmark of Roman statecraft, fostering loyalty and integration while maintaining Roman supremacy. The middle years of the Republic witnessed significant political reforms that further integrated the plebeian class. The Licinian Sextian laws, passed in 367 BCE, were a landmark achievement, mandating that one of the two consuls must be a plebeian, thereby opening the highest office to non-patricians. Over the subsequent decades, plebeians progressively gained access to all major magistracies and religious offices, fundamentally altering the political landscape. While wealth, rather than noble birth, increasingly determined political opportunity, this continuous process of social integration and power sharing helped Rome largely avoid the destructive class conflicts and internal strife that plagued many Greek city-states, ensuring a greater degree of internal stability. Rome's growing power and ambition inevitably brought it into conflict with other regional powers across the Italian peninsula. Through 3 grueling and protracted wars against the formidable mountain peoples of central Italy, collectively known as the Samnites, Rome inexorably extended its control from coast to coast across the rugged heartland of the peninsula, solidifying its dominance. As Rome consolidated its hegemonic position in central and southern Italy, it inevitably encountered the sophisticated Greek cities of Magna Graecia, flourishing colonies imbued with Hellenic culture and wealth. The most powerful of these, Tarentum, felt gravely threatened by Rome's relentless expansion and appealed for assistance from Pyrrhus, the brilliant and ambitious king of Epirus in Greece. Pyrrhus arrived in Italy with a formidable expeditionary force, including war elephants, terrifying beasts previously unknown to the Romans, whose sheer presence often scattered their legions. Despite winning several battles against the Roman armies, Pyrrhus suffered such appallingly heavy casualties that these Pyrrhic victories fatally depleted his forces and resources. After an unsuccessful campaign in Sicily, he famously lamented, "Another such victory and I am undone," and eventually returned to Greece, leaving the Greek cities to face Rome alone. Soon after, Tarentum fell and Rome, with a combination of military might and diplomatic shrewdness, finally controlled the entire Italian peninsula south of the Po River. Rome's governance of this newly formed Italian confederacy demonstrated remarkable political wisdom and foresight. While maintaining firm control over foreign policy and military affairs, Rome allowed its allies a significant degree of local autonomy, respecting their customs and institutions. The extension of various grades of citizenship and legal rights, tailored to different communities, created powerful incentives for loyalty and cooperation rather than rebellion. Strategically placed Roman colonies throughout the peninsula served a dual purpose. They rewarded veteran soldiers with land, fostering Romanization, while simultaneously establishing crucial military outposts that secured Roman control and communications. This ingenious Italian alliance system provided Rome with an unparalleled reservoir of manpower and resources that far outstripped any rival in the Mediterranean world, a decisive advantage in the momentous conflicts yet to come. United Italy, under Roman leadership, represented a geopolitical revolution in the ancient world. A large, resilient territorial state with centralized leadership, yet flexible enough to accommodate vast local diversity. Rome's attention, now firmly established on the Italian mainland, soon turned beyond its shores to the fertile island of Sicily. There, Carthage, a powerful maritime empire with its heart in North Africa, controlled the prosperous western portion of the island, a crucial strategic location. When a band of Italian mercenaries known as the Mamertines, seeking protection against both the Syracusans and Carthaginians in Sicily, urgently requested Roman intervention, Rome faced a momentous and perilous choice. Intervention would mean war with Carthage, a formidable naval power with centuries of maritime experience and a vast fleet capabilities that Rome conspicuously lacked. After intense debate, the Senate, driven by a combination of strategic ambition and a desire to protect its burgeoning influence, made the audacious decision to accept the Mamertines' appeal, thereby triggering the First Punic War, a monumental clash of titans. This prolonged conflict forced Rome, a land-based power, to develop naval capabilities from scratch, a task of staggering difficulty. After early, often catastrophic, defeats at sea, the Romans famously captured a Carthaginian ship and used it as an ingenious template to rapidly build their own fleet. They then equipped these new vessels with a corvus, a revolutionary boarding bridge that allowed Roman soldiers to transform naval engagements into land battles, leveraging their superior infantry skills in close-quarters combat. Despite suffering catastrophic losses to both fierce storms and brutal naval battles, Roman persistence, their unwavering virtus, eventually prevailed. Carthage was forced to cede Sicily to Rome, which became Rome's first overseas province, and pay a substantial war indemnity, marking a new chapter in Roman expansion. The Second Punic War, however, pushed Rome closer to utter destruction than any conflict since the Gallic sack. The brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca, a military genius driven by an oath of vengeance against Rome, led a daring army, complete with war elephants, from Spain, across the formidable Alps, and into the very heart of Italy. He inflicted 3 catastrophic defeats on Roman armies, first at the Tiber River, then at Lake Trasimene, and most devastatingly at Cannae, where perhaps as many as 50,000 Romans perished in a single brutal day, a staggering loss that crippled Rome's manpower. Despite these crushing disasters, Rome, displaying an astonishing and stubborn resilience, absolutely refused to surrender, rallying its people with an indomitable spirit. While Hannibal marched through Italy, skillfully gaining allies among disaffected Roman subjects, Rome, through sheer will, raised new armies. The cautious general Quintus Fabius Maximus adopted brilliant delaying tactics, famously avoiding direct confrontation with Hannibal's superior forces, earning him the epithet cunctator, the delayer. Simultaneously, a young and audacious commander named Publius Cornelius Scipio took the war to Carthaginian territories in Spain and then, crucially, to Africa itself. Faced with an existential threat to Carthage, Hannibal was finally recalled from Italy. At the decisive Battle of Zama, Scipio, now rightly celebrated as Africanus, utterly defeated Hannibal, ending the war and shattering Carthaginian power. Carthage surrendered its entire navy, all its overseas territories, and its political independence, becoming a humbled Roman tributary state. This resounding victory over Carthage established Rome as the unquestioned dominant power in the entire Western Mediterranean, fundamentally reshaping the geopolitical map of the ancient world. With the Western Mediterranean firmly under its sway, Roman attention inexorably turned eastward to the rich and sophisticated Hellenistic kingdoms that had emerged from the fragmented empire of Alexander the Great. The formidable Roman legions successively defeated King Philip V of Macedon in 2 Macedonian wars, and subsequently overcame the mighty Seleucid king Antiochus III at the pivotal battles of Thermopylae and Magnesia. The ancient kingdom of Macedon was formally dissolved, divided into 4 republics under meticulous Roman supervision. While Greece itself eventually came under direct Roman rule, its cities organized into provinces. In the very same year that Greece was absorbed, 146 BCE, a Third Punic War, driven by Roman paranoia and mercantile ambition, culminated in the complete and brutal destruction of Carthage, its fields reportedly sown with salt, ensuring it would never again rise as a rival. These immense conquests, stretching Rome's dominion across the Mediterranean, profoundly transformed Roman society, for better and for worse. Enormous wealth, in the form of tribute, plunder, and trade goods, flowed into Italy from the newly acquired provinces, enriching the state treasury and lines the pockets of private individuals, creating an unprecedented boom. Slaves, captured in the vast numbers during these wars, became incredibly abundant and cheap, fundamentally changing the nature of Italian agriculture. As small, independent farms, the traditional backbone of Roman society, struggled to compete, they increasingly gave way to vast latifundia, large estates worked by anonymous slave labor. This economic shift displaced countless rural citizens, who, dispossessed and impoverished, migrated in droves to Rome, creating immense social tensions in the already crowded and sprawling capital. The Republican political system, originally designed for a small, relatively homogeneous city-state, struggled to administer a vast, diverse, and rapidly expanding Mediterranean empire. Governors sent to rule the distant provinces often shamelessly exploited their positions for personal gain, engaging in widespread corruption and extortion. Increasingly, successful generals, commanding the fierce loyalty of their veteran troops, began to wield immense personal power, creating dangerous potential threats to the traditional civilian authority of the Senate. The revered traditional values of simplicity, civic duty, and selfless sacrifice, known as the mos maiorum, the way of the elders, seemed to wane, slowly eroding as unprecedented luxury, unrestrained ambition, and burgeoning individualism took hold within the Roman elite. These profound internal and external changes collectively set the stage for the tumultuous, blood-soaked final century of the Republic. The seeds of the Republic's demise were sown with the Gracchi brothers. Tiberius Gracchus, elected tribune in 133 BCE, proposed a radical land redistribution program aimed at addressing the pressing issues of rural poverty and the decline of the citizen soldier class. His progressive legislation provoked fierce and violent opposition from wealthy senators who saw their vast landholdings threatened. In an act that shattered centuries of political decorum, they eventually murdered him and many of his supporters, marking the first political assassination in Rome for centuries and irrevocably introducing violence into the political arena. A decade later, his equally ambitious brother, Gaius Gracchus, met a similar tragic fate after proposing even more radical reforms, including state-subsidized grain for urban citizens and extending Roman citizenship. These brutal events irrevocably shattered the traditional consensus of the ruling elite and established political violence as a terrifying and effective tool in Roman politics, unleashing a torrent of civil strife. In the decades that followed, a succession of ambitious and ruthless generals, such as the populist Marius and the aristocratic Sulla, increasingly used their military power and the loyalty of their legions to intervene decisively in political disputes. Sulla's infamous march on Rome in 88 BCE, at the head of his own army, marked an unprecedented and terrifying moment. The first time a Roman general turned his formidable legions against the sacred city itself. After defeating his rivals in a bloody and protracted civil war, Sulla had himself appointed dictator with no term limits and conducted systematic purges of his enemies through proscription lists, public postings naming those to be killed and their property confiscated, plunging Rome into a reign of terror. Though Sulla eventually retired, his actions created a dangerous and ultimately fatal precedent, demonstrating that military force, not senatorial decree, was the ultimate arbiter of power. The Republic, now irrevocably weakened by internal strife and the rise of powerful individuals, spiraled towards its final, agonizing collapse. Three powerful men, the immensely wealthy Crassus, the politically savvy Pompey the Great, and the charismatic and brilliant Julius Caesar, formed an unofficial political alliance known as the First Triumvirate, a pact designed to dominate Roman politics by pooling their vast resources and influence. Caesar, through shrewd maneuvering, secured command in Gaul, where his legendary campaigns, meticulously chronicled in his commentaries, conquered the entirety of modern France and even briefly invaded Britain. These triumphs earned him unprecedented wealth, invaluable military experience, and immense popularity among the Roman people, who adored their conquering hero. When the alliance inevitably fractured, the Senate, deeply alarmed by Caesar's growing power and popularity, aligned itself with Pompey. Ordered to surrender his command and return to Rome as a private citizen, Caesar instead made a fateful and irreversible decision. In 49 BCE, he famously crossed the Rubicon River with his loyal army, igniting a devastating civil war with the iconic declaration, Alia iacta est, the die is cast. After decisively defeating Pompey's forces across the Mediterranean world, Caesar returned to Rome as the undisputed master, having himself declared dictator for life and implementing numerous sweeping reforms, including a new calendar. However, his accumulating honors and perpetual dictatorship alarmed staunch Republicans who saw him as openly aspiring to monarchy, a concept anathema to Rome. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, conspirators led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus assassinated Caesar in the Senate House, believing they were restoring the Republic. Rather than restoring the Republic, Caesar's murder tragically triggered a new cycle of renewed civil war, even more brutal and widespread than before. His adopted son and heir, the cunning Octavian, joined forces with the seasoned general Mark Antony and the less influential Lepidus, forming the Second Triumvirate, a legally sanctioned but ultimately fragile alliance dedicated to hunting down Caesar's killers. After decisively defeating Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi, the triumvirs divided the vast Roman world among themselves. Inevitable tensions quickly emerged, particularly between the ambitious Octavian in the west and the more pleasure-seeking Antony in the east, where he had forged a powerful alliance and a passionate affair with Egypt's charismatic queen, Cleopatra VII. The final, epic-making showdown came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Octavian's forces, skillfully commanded by his loyal general Agrippa, utterly defeated the combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra. The defeated lovers fled to Egypt, where they subsequently committed suicide, leaving Octavian as the sole and undisputed ruler of Rome's vast territories. Octavian, having meticulously observed Caesar's fatal errors, carefully avoided the appearance of outright monarchy. While accumulating unprecedented personal power and control over the legions, he shrewdly maintained the republican facade, referring to himself as princeps, the first citizen, rather than adopting the hated titles of king or dictator. The Senate, now filled with his supporters and acutely aware of the dangers of further civil war, dutifully awarded him the revered title Augustus, a name with profound religious overtones suggesting one who is sacred, majestic, or worthy of veneration, marking the effective end of the Roman Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire. The Republic's legacy was undeniably complex and ultimately tragic. Its intricate constitutional balance, designed to prevent tyranny, had ultimately failed to prevent civil war and the rise of dictatorship. Yet, during its 5 tumultuous centuries, Rome had evolved from a small Italian city-state into the undisputed master of the entire Mediterranean world, a transformation of unparalleled scope. Republican institutions would, in name, continue to exist under the emperors, but their real power was largely subsumed. Nevertheless, the enduring republican ideals of liberty, civic duty, public service, and constitutional government would resonate profoundly through Western political thought for millennia to come, inspiring countless future movements and nations. As Octavian, now adorned with the auspicious title of Augustus, stood before the Senate in January of the year we now mark as 27 BCE, Rome found itself at a profound crossroads. The republic that had gloriously governed for 5 centuries lay in ruins, shattered by decades of devastating civil war and unprecedented bloodshed. Yet, rather than claiming outright monarchy, a path that had cost his adopted father Caesar his life, Octavian performed a masterful political dance, a subtle and brilliant maneuver. He publicly announced the restoration of power to the Senate and the people of Rome, seemingly relinquishing the extraordinary authority he had so painstakingly accumulated during the civil wars. The Senate, now largely comprised of his loyal supporters and exhausted by conflict, responded by granting him the revered name Augustus, a title imbued with deep religious overtones, suggesting one who is revered, sacred, or magnificent. They also meticulously awarded him a carefully assembled package of powers: command of the most strategically important provinces where the vast majority of legions were stationed, tribunician authority, giving him inviolability, the right to convene the Senate and the power to veto, and numerous other civil and religious privileges, all seemingly within republican constitutional frameworks. This pivotal moment marked the birth of what historians call the Principate, a system where Augustus, the first citizen, ruled not as an overt king but as the paramount authority, maintaining the carefully constructed facade of republican government while wielding unprecedented personal power, effectively transforming Rome into an empire under a single ruler. Augustus would rule for an astonishing 41 years, establishing the administrative, military, and social patterns that would define Roman imperial governance for centuries. He drastically reduced the massive army from 60 legions to a more manageable 28, settling loyal veterans in productive colonies throughout Italy and the provinces, turning potential dissidents into stable citizens. He reformed the often corrupt tax system, established a state-run postal service, *cursus publicus*, created dedicated firefighting cohorts, and organized a permanent police force in Rome, bringing order to the sprawling capital. His ambitious building projects utterly transformed Rome's appearance, so much so that he famously boasted of finding Rome a city of brick and leaving it a city of marble, a testament to his vision and unparalleled resources. In foreign affairs, Augustus diligently secured and strategically expanded Rome's vast frontiers. Germanic tribes were decisively pushed back beyond the Rhine and Danube rivers, establishing natural boundaries, while the empire's eastern boundary was secured through skillful diplomacy and military might against the formidable Parthian Empire. Spain was finally fully conquered after centuries of intermittent resistance, and the Danube became Rome's northern frontier in Europe, defining the limits of imperial reach. Perhaps most crucially for the stability of the new imperial system, Augustus created a stable and relatively smooth system of succession, something that had tragically eluded the Republic in its chaotic final decades. Having no natural son of his own, he gradually elevated his capable stepson, Tiberius, to prominence, carefully grooming him for leadership and ensuring a smooth transfer of power upon his own death. Tiberius, a capable general but a famously reluctant and often gloomy ruler, began a dynasty known as the Julio-Claudians, which would govern Rome for more than 50 years. His rule started well, marked by fiscal prudence and administrative efficiency, but it gradually grew increasingly dark and paranoid after he withdrew to the secluded island of Capri, leaving affairs of state largely to his ambitious Praetorian prefect, Sejanus. After uncovering Sejanus's treacherous plot to seize power, Tiberius launched a terrifying wave of treason trials that spread fear and suspicion throughout the Roman aristocracy, forever tarnishing his legacy. Tiberius was succeeded by his grandnephew, Gaius Caesar, infamously known as Caligula. His early promise of a benevolent reign quickly devolved into apparent madness and egregious tyranny. Stories of his excesses, wanton cruelty, and bizarre behavior, including the legendary, though perhaps exaggerated, plan to make his favorite horse a consul, abound. His assassination after just 4 years of unpredictable rule, carried out by disgruntled Praetorian Guard officers, speaks volumes about his profound unpopularity among the Roman elite and the fear he inspired. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite household troops, then dramatically elevated the physically disabled and scholarly Claudius to the throne, plucking him from obscurity. Despite physical disabilities and a perceived awkwardness that had led his family to sideline him, Claudius proved to be a surprisingly able and intelligent administrator. During his 13-year reign, he significantly expanded the empire, notably conquering Britain and incorporating new provinces in the east. He also judiciously extended Roman citizenship more widely and admitted influential Gauls to the venerable Senate, recognizing with farsighted vision that Rome's future strength lay in the comprehensive integration of its provinces rather than in Italian domination alone. The Julio-Claudian dynasty tragically ended with Nero, a figure of immense artistic pretension and devastating cruelty. He began his reign promisingly, guided by the wise philosopher Seneca and the formidable Praetorian prefect Burrus. However, as he asserted his independence, his rule progressively grew tyrannical and notoriously extravagant. He notoriously had his own mother, Agrippina, murdered, kicked his pregnant wife Poppaea to death, and brutally persecuted Christians, scapegoating them after the devastating Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. Rising unpopularity, mounting debt, and widespread revolts eventually led to his downfall. Facing imminent capture, Nero committed suicide, reportedly lamenting, "Qualis artifex perio? What an artist dies in me," a final, self-serving declaration of his warped priorities. Nero's death plunged the empire into a year of chaos and civil war, known as the Year of Four Emperors, 69 CE. In quick succession, the generals Galba, Otho, and Vitellius each claimed the imperial throne, only to be violently overthrown by military revolt, highlighting the dangerous power of the legions. Finally, Titus Flavius Vespasianus, a pragmatic and seasoned general commanding the eastern legions, emerged victorious, establishing the new Flavian dynasty. Vespasian, a man of humble origins with a refreshingly practical and down-to-earth approach to governance, brought desperately needed stability back to the empire during his 10-year reign. He meticulously restored fiscal responsibility after Nero's notorious extravagance, stabilizing the imperial treasury. His greatest architectural legacy was initiating the construction of the magnificent Flavian Amphitheater, better known today as the Colosseum, deliberately built on the site of Nero's opulent Golden House as a symbolic gift to the Roman people, reclaiming public land for public use. His eldest son, Titus, succeeded him, ruling for a tragically short period of just over 2 years. His reign, though brief, was marked by immense challenges, occurring just months before the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which devastatingly destroyed the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Titus handled this and other disasters, including a massive fire in Rome, with such profound compassion and exemplary leadership that he was widely mourned upon his untimely death, remembered as a beloved emperor. The final Flavian emperor was Titus's younger brother, Domitian, whose 15-year reign, while effective in administration and military leadership, particularly along the Danube frontier and in Britain, grew increasingly autocratic and paranoid. His dictatorial tendencies alienated the powerful Senate, leading to widespread resentment and fear. His assassination in 96 CE brought the Flavian dynasty to an abrupt end, once again plunging the succession into uncertainty. The Senate, now asserting its authority, then selected one of its own respected members, the elderly Nerva, as emperor. Recognizing his lack of a natural heir and limited military support, Nerva made a brilliant and farsighted decision. He adopted the popular and highly capable General Trajan as his successor. This sagacious act established a pattern of adoptive succession, choosing the most qualified individual rather than relying on birthright, a system that would serve Rome brilliantly for nearly a century, ushering in an era of unprecedented prosperity and stability. Trajan, born in Hispania, modern Spain, thus became the first emperor from outside Italy, a significant milestone. His 19-year reign witnessed the Roman Empire reach its greatest territorial extent, a testament to his military genius. He famously conquered Dacia, roughly modern Romania, incorporating its rich gold mines into the imperial treasury, a feat commemorated by Trajan's column in Rome. His most ambitious campaigns annexed Armenia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Parthia, briefly extending Roman rule all the way to the Persian Gulf, a high watermark of Roman expansion that pushed the empire to its absolute limits. Though some of these eastern conquests would be pragmatically abandoned by his successor, they represented the zenith of Roman military ambition and reach. Beyond military glory, Trajan was universally celebrated for his enlightened domestic policies. His extensive building programs included a massive and magnificent forum in Rome, a triumph of urban planning and architecture, as well as numerous public works throughout the provinces, benefiting all corners of the empire. He established the Alimenta, a pioneering welfare program providing state support for poor children in Italy, showcasing his deep concern for his subjects' well-being. Trajan was, even by later Romans, universally regarded as the Optimus Princeps, the optimal emperor, against whom all other rulers were measured, a benchmark of imperial excellence. On his deathbed, Trajan may have adopted his capable relative Hadrian, though some historical sources suggest the adoption was shrewdly fabricated by Hadrian's influential supporters to ensure a smooth transition of power. Regardless, Hadrian became emperor, solidifying his claim amidst the lingering whispers of a questionable adoption. His ascension immediately signaled a profound shift in imperial policy. Hadrian possessed a clear-eyed understanding that the vast Roman Empire had finally reached its practical, sustainable limits. He swiftly made the strategic decision to abandon many of Trajan's recent eastern conquests, notably Mesopotamia, and reoriented the empire's focus from aggressive expansion to internal consolidation and defensive strengthening. This wasn't a retreat born of weakness, but a calculated pivot towards long-term stability. For more than half of his remarkable 21-year reign, Hadrian embarked on extensive travels throughout the provinces. This wasn't merely a royal tour. He immersed himself in the realities of his empire, often marching on foot with his legions, sharing their hardships, and meticulously inspecting frontier defenses firsthand. This direct engagement fostered loyalty among the troops and provided invaluable insights into regional challenges. His most famous legacy in this regard is Hadrian's Wall in Britain, a colossal defensive fortification spanning the island's narrow northern neck. This monumental barrier, designed to repel incursions from the Caledonian and Pictish tribes, not only solidified Roman control but also served as a symbolic demarcation of Roman civilization's edge. Much of it stands partially intact today, a testament to Roman engineering. Across the empire, similar frontier works, the limes, were reinforced and formalized, establishing clear, permanent boundaries in stark contrast to the previous centuries of relentless expansion. Hadrian was a known Hellenophile, a passionate admirer of Greek culture. He famously grew a beard in the Hellenic fashion, a stark departure from the clean-shaven visages of his Roman predecessors, signifying his intellectual and artistic leanings. He spent extensive periods in Athens, actively participating in its cultural life and overseeing the monumental completion of the Temple of Olympian Zeus, a colossal project that had languished for centuries. In Rome, his architectural genius found expression in the Pantheon, a marvel of engineering with its revolutionary unreinforced concrete dome and majestic oculus, which remains standing today as an unparalleled testament to Roman ingenuity and artistic vision. Beyond these grand public works, his private retreat, Hadrian's Villa in Tivoli, was a sprawling complex embodying his eclectic tastes and vast architectural ambitions. Hadrian's chosen successor, Antoninus Pius, ascended the throne and ruled for 23 remarkably peaceful years. His reign, largely devoid of major wars or internal strife, allowed the empire to enjoy a period of unprecedented stability and economic prosperity. He earned the epithet pious for his devotion to duty and his commitment to honoring Hadrian's memory. Continuing the enlightened tradition of adoption, Antoninus, having no biological sons, carefully selected Marcus Aurelius as his heir, with the insightful provision that Marcus, in turn, adopt Lucius Verus as his co-emperor. This foresight aimed to ensure a smooth transition and shared burden of leadership. Marcus Aurelius, a profound Stoic philosopher whose enduring meditations continue to inspire reflection today, found his reign tragically dominated by relentless military challenges, a stark contradiction to his deeply contemplative nature. From the north, Germanic tribes, possibly displaced by even larger population movements deeper in Europe and Asia, began to press against the Roman frontiers along the Danube in greater numbers and with more aggression than ever before, initiating the protracted Marcomannic Wars. While Marcus initially ruled jointly with Lucius Verus, Lucius's premature death from illness left Marcus in sole command during these increasingly dire times. Beyond the external threats, the empire was simultaneously struck by the devastating Antonine Plague, likely a virulent strain of smallpox, brought back by troops returning from campaigns in the east. This pandemic swept through Roman territories, potentially claiming up to 5 million lives and severely weakening both military manpower and economic vitality at a critical juncture. Despite these overwhelming adversities, Marcus Aurelius steadfastly maintained the frontiers and even harbored ambitious plans to establish new provinces beyond the Danube before his death. However, Marcus Aurelius made a fateful departure from the wise adoptive succession system that had defined the preceding century. Instead of choosing the most qualified candidate, he allowed his biological son, Commodus, to succeed him in a decision that would have dire and immediate consequences for Rome. Looking back across this glorious two-century span, from Augustus's reign to the death of Marcus Aurelius, this era unmistakably represents the Roman Empire at its zenith, a golden age of unparalleled peace and prosperity. The empire's population may have reached an astonishing 70 million people, living in relative security under the Pax Romana, the famed Roman peace. A vast, sophisticated network of roads, totaling over 250,000 miles, approximately 400,000 kilometers, crisscrossed the empire, facilitating rapid trade, efficient communication, and swift military movement throughout the Mediterranean basin and far beyond. Cities flourished with public amenities that were unknown in earlier ages. Meticulously engineered aqueducts delivered fresh water, grand public baths served as social hubs, magnificent theaters entertained, and bustling forums provided commercial and civic centers. Roman law, growing ever more sophisticated, humane, and systematized, was administered with remarkable consistency across 3 continents, laying foundations for legal systems millennia later. Literature and art thrived during this period as well. Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, Ovid's Metamorphoses, the incisive histories of Tacitus, the gossipy biographies of Suetonius, and the eloquent letters of Pliny the Younger, all stand as monumental works dating from this intellectually vibrant era. While theoretical scientific innovations may have lagged behind literary achievements, practical knowledge in fields like architecture, engineering, agriculture, and medicine advanced considerably, contributing to a daily life for Romans that was arguably more comfortable and organized than for any large population before them. Perhaps most significantly, this period witnessed the birth and early, steady spread of Christianity. Jesus of Nazareth lived and died during the reign of Tiberius, and the new religion slowly but inexorably diffused throughout the empire, defying sporadic but often brutal persecution. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, vibrant Christian communities had established footholds in most major cities, quietly laying the foundational structures for developments that would profoundly transform the later empire. The early empire also marked the increasing importance of the provinces. Italy gradually lost its privileged, central position as emperors hailing from Spain, North Africa, and other provincial backgrounds assumed the purple, symbolizing a more integrated, less Italo-centric empire. Citizenship was progressively extended more widely, culminating generations later in its grant to virtually all free inhabitants of the empire by Caracalla. Intricate trade networks connected distant regions, with exotic goods flowing from as far as India and China into bustling Roman markets, demonstrating the empire's vast economic reach. This remarkable era of stability and prosperity rested on several crucial pillars. The Augustan settlement, which carefully balanced imperial power with a respectful nod to republican traditions. The ingenious adoption system, which consistently produced a series of highly capable and dedicated rulers. Frontiers secure enough to prevent major invasions, allowing internal development. An economy that, despite its limitations by modern standards, generated sufficient surplus to maintain. Sophisticated urban civilization, and, critically, a formidable standing army of nearly 400,000 professional men. As Marcus Aurelius drew his final breath on the Danubian frontier, steeped in the struggles against the Germanic tribes, none could truly foresee that this golden age was, in fact, drawing to a close. The accession of Commodus would tragically mark the beginning of a period of profound troubles and unprecedented instability that would test the very resilience of the imperial system in ways its sagacious creators never imagined. Yet, the achievements of the early empire would resonate through the centuries, forging an enduring ideal of peace, prosperity, and effective governance that would inspire civilizations long after Rome itself had fallen. The radiant glow of the Roman Empire's golden age began to dim with the accession of Commodus, following the death of his philosophical father, Marcus Aurelius. Unlike Marcus, Commodus harbored little interest in the demanding burdens of governance. Though undeniably handsome and athletically built, he disdained the council chamber, preferring the raw spectacle and personal glory of the gladiatorial arena. He frequently engaged in staged combats, often boasting of thousands of victories against opponents who dared not defeat an emperor, all while extravagantly draining the imperial treasury for his appearances. While Commodus indulged his increasingly bizarre fantasies, even going so far as to rename Rome Colonia Commodiana and styling himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, the complex machinery of the empire continued to function largely due to the dedication of experienced administrators who bravely navigated his eccentricities. Nevertheless, his capricious executions of senators and high-ranking officials created a pervasive climate of fear and uncertainty among Rome's elite. On the final day of the year 192 CE, his tumultuous reign was abruptly ended when he was strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, Narcissus, part of a desperate plot involving his inner circle who rightly feared they would be his next victims. Following Commodus's assassination, the venerable General Pertinax was elevated to the throne by a hopeful Senate, eager to restore order. His earnest attempts to reassert discipline and fiscal responsibility among the notoriously unruly Praetorian Guard, however, proved fatal. After a mere 3 months, they brutally murdered him when he refused their exorbitant demands for a special bonus. What followed was perhaps the most shameful and degrading episode in Roman history. The Praetorians, emboldened by their unchecked power, literally auctioned the imperial throne to the highest bidder. Didius Gellianus, a wealthy senator, won this dubious honor, but his ignominious reign lasted only 66 days, a stark demonstration of how far the imperial office had fallen. Across the provinces, disgusted by the unseemly events unfolding in Rome, powerful legions rejected the capital's chosen puppet emperors and put forward their own commanders as legitimate imperial candidates. From this chaos emerged Septimius Severus, the astute and formidable commander of the Pannonian legions. He swiftly marched on Rome, disbanded the disgraced Praetorians, and established a new, militarily focused dynasty. Severus was a capable, ruthless soldier who secured his position through a combination of decisive military victories and the brutal, systematic elimination of all his rivals. Born in Leptis Magna in North Africa, he was the first emperor from that continent and reportedly spoke Latin with a distinct accent, a subtle sign of the empire's broadening leadership. His 18-year reign brought significant changes to Roman governance, notably an increasing militarization of the administration and a greater reliance on competent equestrians rather than the old senatorial aristocracy for key positions, emphasizing merit and loyalty to the army. During his rule, Severus conducted successful campaigns in the east against the long-standing Parthian Empire, creating the rich new province of Mesopotamia. He also traveled to Britain, not only strengthening Hadrian's Wall but also launching punitive campaigns against the Caledonians in Scotland. It was there, in the northern outpost of Eboracum, modern York, that he died, famously advising his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn all other men, a maxim that perfectly encapsulated his martial philosophy. His sons, Caracalla and Geta, were intended to rule jointly, but their deep-seated hatred for each other made cooperation an impossibility. Within a year of their father's death, Caracalla had his brother murdered in their mother's arms, a horrifying act of fratricide. He then ordered a damnatio memoriae, erasing Geta's name and image from official records and monuments, a chilling attempt to blot him from history. Caracalla subsequently embarked on a brutal reign of terror against Geta's supporters. Despite his cruelty and paranoia, Caracalla issued one of the most historically significant edicts in Roman history, the Constitutio Antoniniana in 212 CE. This decree granted Roman citizenship to all free men within the empire. While partially motivated by a pragmatic desire to increase tax revenue, as only citizens paid certain taxes, this monumental edict formalized the evolution of Rome from a city-state into a truly universal empire, where citizenship was now defined by law and imperial identity rather than by ethnic origin or geographical proximity to Rome. Caracalla's reign ended abruptly in 217 CE when he was assassinated while campaigning in the east, stabbed to death by a disgruntled soldier as he relieved himself along a road. The Severan dynasty continued, albeit briefly, through a series of rulers connected by the remarkable and often ruthless women of the family, particularly Julia Maesa, Septimius Severus's sister-in-law. She deftly engineered the rise of her grandsons, first Elagabalus, and later Alexander Severus. Elagabalus scandalized traditional Rome with his fanatical religious devotion to the Eastern sun god whose name he bore, attempting to make this foreign cult supreme over traditional Roman worship. His alleged effeminacy, including widespread reports that he married a male charioteer, further alienated the conservative Roman populace and elite. After just 4 years, the Praetorians, disgusted by his excesses, murdered him and unceremoniously threw his body into the Tiber. His young cousin, Alexander Severus, only 13 when he ascended the throne, ruled under the regency of his capable mother, Julia Mamaea. His 13-year reign represented an earnest attempt to restore good relations with the Senate and uphold traditional Roman values. However, military challenges were mounting relentlessly on all fronts. A powerful new Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, had replaced the old Parthians and posed a far greater, more organized threat in the east. Simultaneously, Germanic tribes intensified their pressure on the critical Rhine and Danube frontiers. When Alexander, a more intellectual and less martial emperor, attempted to negotiate with Germanic tribes rather than confront them militarily, his exasperated troops mutinied. They proclaimed Maximinus Thrax, a giant former shepherd from Thrace who had risen through military ranks, as emperor, initiating a new and brutal era. Maximinus represented a new archetype of emperor, a rough-hewn soldier of humble origins, with little formal education or aristocratic refinement, who had risen solely through military merit and brute force. Though an effective general on the battlefield, his harsh taxation policies, designed to fund his constant military campaigns, made him deeply unpopular with the civilian populace. The Senate, desperate to restore its dwindling influence, threw its support behind a revolt led by the elderly Governor Gordian and his son in Africa. When they were quickly defeated, the Senate, in a rare but ultimately futile show of defiance, appointed 2 of its own members, Pupienus and Balbinus, as co-emperors. Maximinus marched on Italy to crush this challenge but was murdered by his own troops during their siege of Aquileia. The Senate's appointees, Pupienus and Balbinus, were themselves soon killed by the ever-treacherous Praetorian Guard, who then elevated the 13-year-old Gordian III, grandson of the earlier claimant, to the throne. This dizzying sequence of rapidly changing emperors and bloody usurpers inaugurated what historians now refer to as the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next few decades, at least 26 different men claimed the imperial title, most ruling for only a few tumultuous years before meeting violent ends. The Roman world seemed to be unraveling, as the imperial office became little more than a coveted prize in an endless, destructive military lottery. External threats relentlessly compounded the internal chaos. In 251 CE, Emperor Decius and his son tragically died fighting Goths at the Battle of Abritus, making Decius the first Roman emperor to fall in battle against foreign enemies. The Emperor Valerian suffered an even more shocking and humiliating fate in 260 CE. He was captured alive by the Sassanid Persian king Shapur I and allegedly used as a human footstool before being flayed after death and stuffed as a macabre trophy, a brutal symbol of Rome's perceived weakness. With central authority utterly collapsing, the empire began to fragment. In the west, a Gallic empire encompassing Gaul, Britain, and parts of Spain broke away under a succession of local rulers. In the east, The vibrant desert trading city of Palmyra, under the ambitious and powerful Queen Zenobia, established de facto control over vast provinces stretching from Egypt to Asia Minor. An economic crisis of unprecedented scale accompanied this political disintegration. The currency was repeatedly debased to pay the ever-demanding armies, triggering hyperinflation that crippled trade and brought immense hardship. It seemed to many that Rome's thousand-year story might indeed be approaching its inglorious end. Yet, even in this darkest hour, resilient structures and remarkably capable individuals emerged to pull the empire back from the brink of total collapse. The true turning point came with the accession of Claudius II Gothicus in 268 CE. In his brief but decisive two-year reign, he defeated Gothic invaders in the Balkans so crushingly that he earned the prestigious title Gothicus. Though he tragically died of plague, his crucial work of stabilization was powerfully continued by Aurelian, acclaimed by his loyal troops following Claudius's death. Aurelian's dynamic five-year reign, 270 to 275 CE, earned him the well-deserved title Restitutor Orbis, Restorer of the World. He decisively defeated the Palmyrene Empire, famously parading Queen Zenobia through Rome in golden chains during his magnificent triumph. He then recovered the breakaway Gallic provinces, thereby reunifying the fractured empire. To protect Rome itself from increasingly bold barbarian raids, he built a massive new circuit of defensive walls, the Aurelian Walls, much of which still stands partially intact today. He also reformed the debased currency, restoring some economic stability, and established an official state sun cult, Sol Invictus, attempting to provide a unifying religious identity for the diverse empire. Aurelian's assassination in 275 CE, based on a secretary's false claim that the emperor planned to execute several officers, threatened to unravel all his achievements. Several short-lived emperors followed before Carus established a brief dynasty. While campaigning successfully against Persia, Carus allegedly died when his tent was struck by lightning, though assassination remains a plausible alternative. His son Numerian was brutally murdered by his praetorian prefect, Arrius Aper, while returning from the Persian campaign. At Numerian's funeral, the assembled officers, seeking stability, acclaimed Diocletian, a shrewd cavalry commander of humble Dalmatian origin, as the new emperor. Diocletian immediately executed Aper personally, a symbolic act that reportedly fulfilled an old prophecy that he would become emperor after killing the boar, Aper in Latin. With Diocletian's accession in 284 CE, the tumultuous crisis period finally ended. Though the empire had survived, it was profoundly and irreversibly transformed. The old Augustan Principate, with its careful balance of republican forms and imperial power, was gone forever. In its place stood a more overtly autocratic system, known as the Dominate, where the emperor was increasingly seen as a remote, sacred, and divinely ordained figure, Dominus et Deus, Lord and God, rather than merely first among equals. Military needs now utterly dominated all aspects of governance. The army had nearly doubled in size to face multiple frontier threats simultaneously, consuming an ever larger share of the state's dwindling resources. Taxation had grown heavier and far more systematic, enforced by a burgeoning bureaucracy to support these forces. The traditional distinction between privileged Italy and the provinces had largely vanished as the entire empire now shouldered similar, crushing burdens. Yet, despite the trauma of the 3rd century crisis, important cultural developments continued to unfold. This period saw the rise of Neoplatonism through philosophers like Plotinus, whose mystical vision of reality and the divine would deeply influence later Christian thought. Christianity itself spread widely during these troubled decades, offering spiritual solace, hope, and community in uncertain times. The religion that had once been a persecuted minority was rapidly becoming a major, influential force in Roman society. Roman law continued to evolve and be refined, with brilliant jurists like Ulpian and Papinian shaping legal concepts that would influence civilizations far beyond Rome's eventual fall. Despite severe economic difficulties, Roman engineering still produced remarkable works, from Aurelian's massive walls protecting Rome to essential public buildings throughout the provinces. As the 3rd century closed, the empire that Diocletian inherited was wounded and scarred, but not defeated. The coming reforms would reshape Rome's government and society completely, forging a new imperial system capable of meeting the complex challenges of a changing world. The agonizing transition from the early empire of Augustus to the late Roman world was now complete, a transformation forged in the crucible of crisis and recovery. As Diocletian stood victorious, having claimed the purple and brought an end to the protracted civil wars, the Roman world lay exhausted from a half-century of existential crisis. Drawing profound lessons from this turmoil, the new emperor would reshape imperial governance more dramatically and fundamentally than anyone since Augustus himself. Born into a humble family in Dalmatia, on the Adriatic coast, Diocletian had risen through military service alone, without the benefit of aristocratic connections or inherited wealth. This outsider's perspective perhaps allowed him to see more clearly the systemic, deeply rooted problems facing Rome. The empire had grown too vast, too complex, and too geographically dispersed for a single ruler to manage effectively. Military emergencies on one distant frontier often required the emperor's immediate presence, just as critical crises erupted elsewhere, causing dangerous delays. Recognizing this unsustainable reality, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of appointing a co-emperor. In 285 CE, he elevated his trusted fellow officer, Maximian, to the rank of Augustus, assigning him primary responsibility for the western provinces, while Diocletian himself focused his formidable energies on the more populous and wealthier east. This initial division, however, proved insufficient to address the myriad challenges. So, Diocletian expanded the imperial college further in 293 CE by appointing two junior emperors, known as Caesars, Galerius in the east and Constantius Chlorus in the west. This ingenious, albeit complex, system, known as the Tetrarchy or Rule of Four, effectively divided administrative responsibilities while meticulously maintaining the official fiction of a unified Roman Empire. Each tetrarch governed a quarter of Roman territory from his own strategically located capital city, like Nicomedia, Sirmium, Mediolanum, Milan, or Augusta Treverorum, Trier, as Rome itself definitively lost its central, undisputed role. The arrangement ingeniously included a plan for orderly succession. After 20 years, the senior Augusti would voluntarily retire, allowing the Caesars to be promoted to Augustus and, in turn, select new junior Caesars. This mechanism was specifically designed to prevent the devastating succession crises that had plagued the 3rd century. Beyond restructuring imperial leadership, Diocletian undertook a comprehensive reorganization of the empire's administrative geography. Provinces were subdivided into smaller, more manageable units, nearly doubling their number. These smaller provinces were then grouped into 12 larger administrative units called dioceses, themselves organized into 4 massive prefectures, corresponding to each tetrarch's territory. This intricate, multi-layered arrangement created increased oversight, intended to reduce corruption, improve efficiency, and make governance more responsive at a local level. The military underwent similar, sweeping reorganization. Diocletian strategically separated civil and military authority, which had traditionally been combined in provincial governors, thereby limiting the power of potentially rebellious generals. He substantially increased the overall size of the army to address multiple frontier threats simultaneously and established a sophisticated system of limitanii, border guards, and comitatenses, central mobile reserves, that could respond quickly to crises. These expanded military and administrative structures naturally required vastly greater resources. Diocletian implemented a comprehensive census to accurately identify taxable wealth and individuals across the empire. His new tax system largely abandoned the increasingly worthless currency, instead requiring payment in kind, fixed quotas of produce and goods collected from each region, ensuring that the state had the necessary provisions for its armies and administration. To ensure that essential services continued in a period of economic instability, Diocletian mandated hereditary occupations for certain vital professions, binding sons to follow their fathers' trades, from bakers to soldiers, significantly curtailing individual freedom. While these bold reforms undeniably stabilized the empire, they came at the considerable cost of significantly increased state control over individual lives. The relatively free market economy of the early empire gave way to a far more regulated, centralized system where the state's insatiable needs took precedence over private initiative. The distinction between the honestiores, the privileged classes, and the humiliores, the lower classes, became even more pronounced, with different legal standards and punishments applied to each. Diocletian also attempted to address the raging economic instability through his infamous edict on maximum prices, 301 CE, which set price ceilings for thousands of goods and services throughout the empire. Though well-intentioned, this draconian measure proved impossible to enforce, leading to widespread black markets, and was ultimately abandoned. In religious matters, Diocletian initially showed a degree of tolerance, but later, in 303 CE, launched what became known as the Great Persecution against Christians. This final and most severe imperial attempt to suppress Christianity included the systematic destruction of churches, confiscation of sacred scripture, and the execution of clergy. Despite its intensity and widespread brutality, the persecution varied by region and ultimately failed to halt Christianity's inexorable spread. True to his meticulously designed succession plan, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of voluntarily retiring from office in 305 CE, compelling his co-Augustus, Maximian, to do the same. He spent his remaining years cultivating cabbages at his magnificent palace in Split, on the Dalmatian coast, reportedly telling visitors that only someone who had been emperor could truly understand the profound pleasures of retirement. However, Diocletian's carefully designed tetrarchic system collapsed almost immediately after its creator's retirement. The carefully orchestrated succession plans were fatally undermined by the reassertion of dynastic sentiment as ambitious troops proclaimed Constantine, son of Constantius Chlorus, and Maxentius, son of Maximian, as emperors. The following years saw complex and brutal power struggles, a renewal of civil war as various claimants fought for ultimate supremacy. Constantine eventually emerged victorious from these devastating conflicts. According to Christian tradition, before the crucial battle of the Milvian Bridge against Maxentius in 312 CE, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky emblazoned with the words in hoc signo vinces. In this sign, conquer. Whether motivated by genuine spiritual conversion or astute political calculation, Constantine's eventual embrace of Christianity would profoundly transform the Roman world forever. The Edict of Milan, issued jointly with his eastern colleague Licinius in 313 CE, formally ended the persecution of Christians throughout the empire and restored their confiscated property. Though not yet making Christianity the official state religion, the edict granted it legal status and, crucially, imperial favor. Constantine later defeated Licinius in 324 CE to become the sole ruler of a once again reunited empire. Perhaps Constantine's most consequential decision was the founding of a new capital on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. Dedicated in 330 CE as Constantinople, City of Constantine, it occupied an unparalleled strategic position, controlling the vital strait between Europe and Asia. This new, Christian city, deliberately free from Rome's deep-seated pagan associations, would serve as the glorious imperial capital for over 1,000 years, becoming the heart of the Byzantine Empire. Constantine maintained many of Diocletian's administrative reforms, while judiciously softening their harsher aspects. He created a new, stable gold currency, the solidus, which maintained its value for centuries, bringing much-needed monetary stability after decades of ruinous inflation. His religious policies shrewdly favored Christians without directly suppressing traditional pagan worship, initiating a gradual, inexorable transition that would accelerate dramatically under his successors. After Constantine's death in 337 CE, the empire passed to his three surviving sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. Their reigns were tragically marked by fratricidal conflict and continuing fierce religious tensions, particularly surrounding the Arian controversy about Christ's divine nature. Constantius II eventually emerged as sole emperor, ruling until his death in 361 CE. The brief but significant reign of Julian the Apostate, Constantine's nephew, marked the last serious attempt to restore traditional Roman polytheistic religion. Raised as a Christian but secretly converting to paganism, Julian sought to revitalize classical culture and actively reduce Christian privileges during his intense 18-month rule. His death in 363 CE while fighting the Persians abruptly ended this religious counter-revolution. The emperors who followed Julian consistently maintained Christianity's favored position, further cementing its ascendancy. Under Theodosius I, Christianity finally became the official state religion of the Roman Empire in 380 CE. The Edict of Thessalonica established Nicene Christianity as the empire's sole legitimate faith, while subsequent edicts closed pagan temples and explicitly prohibited traditional sacrifices. The millennium-old religious traditions that had sustained Rome since its very founding were now officially, imperially abandoned. Beyond religious matters, Theodosius faced significant external challenges. His predecessor, Valens, had suffered a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE against Gothic forces, with perhaps two-thirds of the Eastern Field Army annihilated and Valens himself killed on the battlefield. This devastating battle profoundly demonstrated the growing, irreversible military threat posed by Germanic peoples who were increasingly seeking land and settlement within the empire's borders. Rather than attempting to expel these powerful Goths, Theodosius opted for a pragmatic, albeit controversial, solution. He settled them within imperial territory as foederati, allied troops, allowing them to serve under their own leaders while nominally acknowledging Roman sovereignty. This arrangement provided much-needed manpower for the depleted Roman armies but, critically, increased the influence and semi-autonomous nature of Germanic groups within Roman borders, a dangerous precedent. The late Roman military relied increasingly on such allied contingents and also recruited heavily among Germanic peoples for regular units. The simplified stereotype of effete Romans hiring barbarians to fight their battles is misleading. Many Romans still served with distinction, and many barbarians were thoroughly Romanized and loyal. Nevertheless, the army's ethnic composition and cultural identity had changed significantly from earlier centuries. Social and economic developments during this period fundamentally reflected the empire's profound transformation. Christianity reshaped core cultural values, emphasizing otherworldly salvation and humility over classical civic virtues and military glory. The urban middle classes, the backbone of municipal life, declined significantly as imperial service and vast agricultural estates, latifundia, dominated economic life, consolidating wealth and power in the hands of a few aristocrats. Cities themselves shrank within newly built defensive walls, their once grand classical monuments often cannibalized for building material or converted to Christian use, symbolizing a changing world. Yet, even amid these dramatic changes, remarkable cultural achievements continued. This era saw the flourishing of patristic literature as brilliant Christian thinkers like Ambrose, Jerome, and Augustine developed sophisticated theological and philosophical systems that would profoundly influence Western thought for centuries to come. In the realm of law, the Theodosian Code, 438 CE, compiled imperial legislation, creating a systematic legal reference that meticulously preserved Roman jurisprudence for future generations. Upon Theodosius's death in 395 CE, the empire was formally divided between his two young sons, Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. Though theoretically a temporary administrative measure, this division would, in practice, prove permanent. While the eastern and western courts maintained the polite fiction of a unified empire, they increasingly pursued separate interests and faced distinct challenges. The eastern half, wealthier, more populous, and better protected geographically, would endure for another 1,000 years as what modern historians call the Byzantine Empire, though its citizens proudly continued to call themselves Romans. The western half, however, faced existential challenges, relentless barbarian migrations, economic decline, and political instability that would lead to its definitive collapse within a single lifetime, bringing Rome's millennial story to a sorrowful end. As the 4th century closed, the profoundly transformed Roman state bore little resemblance to the carefully constructed Principate of Augustus. The emperor now ruled as an Oriental-style monarch, addressed as Dominus, Lord, rather than Princeps, first citizen. Officials bowed low before the imperial presence, which was increasingly secluded behind elaborate court ceremonial and rigid etiquette, projecting an image of almost divine detachment from the earthly realm. The days of emperors walking among their troops were long gone. Christianity had irrevocably transformed the spiritual landscape, displacing the polytheistic Roman pantheon and challenging core assumptions about society, morality, and human destiny. This new faith introduced concepts of universal salvation, a single divine authority, and a focus on an afterlife, profoundly reshaping the Roman worldview. Yet, for all these monumental shifts, the fundamental scaffolding of Roman governance demonstrated remarkable resilience. The vast empire, though politically fractured and culturally evolving, still nominally controlled territories broadly mirroring its extent under the Antonine emperors of centuries past. Latin and Greek remained the indispensable languages of administration, their precise, structured grammars forming the bedrock of imperial bureaucracy. Roman law, in its sophisticated and adaptable form, continued to regulate daily life for millions, its principles of justice and order providing a persistent framework. Even as the very definition of Roman identity broadened and mutated under changing circumstances, citizens across the empire still largely identified with this enduring heritage. The stage was now ominously set for the final act of the Western Empire's long and often tragic drama. As relentless Germanic pressure intensified along the increasingly permeable frontiers, and internal resources dwindled, the Western emperors found themselves grappling with a cascade of challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The coming century, from the close of the Fourth to the dawn of the Fifth, would witness the agonizing dissolution of direct Roman rule in the West. Paradoxically, even as its western twin faltered and fragmented, the eastern half of the empire adapted and endured, a testament to its deeper institutional strengths and geographical advantages. The Roman world, though theoretically a single entity, stood profoundly divided between the sons of Theodosius the Great, Arcadius in Constantinople and Honorius in Milan, while technically joint rulers of an indivisible empire, presided over increasingly distinct and often competitive realms. Both young emperors, inexperienced and often weak-willed, relied heavily on powerful, ambitious advisors, Rufinus in the east and Stilicho in the west. The inevitable court intrigues and power struggles that ensued tragically weakened imperial authority at the very moment Rome faced its most formidable external challenge in centuries. The true catalyst for this deepening crisis was the sudden and terrifying arrival of the Huns from the vast Eurasian steppes. Their brutal westward migration acted as a colossal, irresistible force, pushing Germanic peoples of Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, and others against and ultimately across the Roman frontiers in numbers unprecedented and overwhelming. The most immediate and potent threat emerged from the Goths, who, after the death of their leader Fritigern, united under the cunning and ambitious new king Alaric. These Goths, initially settled within the empire as foederati allies, following their stunning victory at Adrianople, felt unjustly mistreated by haughty imperial authorities who often failed to deliver promised supplies and respect. When their urgent demands for better terms and treatment were rebuffed with Roman arrogance, they revolted with a fury born of desperation. The Goths began a devastating movement through the Balkans, alternately negotiating with, and brutally plundering and threatening, both the eastern and western imperial courts, holding them hostage to their shifting loyalties. In the west, the unenviable task of managing this escalating Gothic threat fell to Stilicho, a figure of complex loyalties. Though himself of partial Vandal ancestry, he was utterly Roman in his cultural identity and unwavering devotion to the empire. He approached the Gothic challenge with a nuanced strategy, employing a combination of decisive military action and shrewd, pragmatic diplomacy. However, his efforts were tragically undermined by a pervasive miasma of suspicion emanating from both imperial courts, each consumed by the fear that he harbored ambitions to control the entire Roman world, effectively becoming the power behind both thrones. Following Stilicho's politically motivated execution on trumped-up charges of treason in 408 CE, a decision often cited by historians as a catastrophic blunder, the Western Empire was left critically vulnerable, stripped of its most capable and experienced defender. With Stilicho, the last great general of the West, gone, Alaric, ever opportunistic, saw his moment. He invaded Italy with an unhindered army and, in 410 CE, accomplished what had not happened in over 8 centuries, the monumental and psychologically devastating sack of Rome itself. Although the Goths remained in the city for only 3 days, and the physical damage was relatively contained compared to later devastations, the psychological impact on the entire Roman world, both east and west, was immense, echoing through the ages. Saint Jerome, writing from his monastic cell in Bethlehem, famously lamented with profound grief that the bright light of all the world was put out, and the whole world perished in one city. Shortly after the sack, Alaric himself died. His Goths subsequently moved into Gaul and eventually settled in Aquitaine, once again as Roman federates, a precarious and often uneasy alliance. Meanwhile, a host of other Germanic peoples, capitalizing on a particularly harsh winter, had crossed the frozen Rhine in 406 CE, a porous barrier now rendered utterly impotent. They poured into Gaul and eventually spread into Spain. These included the Vandals, the Suebi, and the Alans, who, through a combination of conquest and uneasy settlement, established their own burgeoning territories within what were still nominally Roman provinces, effectively carving out independent enclaves within the empire's borders. The Western imperial government, which had prudently relocated its capital to Ravenna, a coastal city offering superior defensive capabilities compared to the increasingly vulnerable Rome, struggled desperately to respond to these multiple, simultaneous incursions. Increasingly, real power did not reside with the emperor himself, often a figurehead, but with the magister militum or master of soldiers, the supreme military commander. For nearly 2 crucial decades, this position was held by Flavius Aetius, sometimes reverently called the last of the Romans. While Aetius valiantly worked to maintain what rapidly diminishing Roman authority remained in Gaul, a new and existential threat emerged in North Africa. The Vandals, under their brilliant and ruthless king Gaiseric, crossed from Spain to Africa in 429 CE, conquering the fabulously wealthy provinces that had for centuries served as Rome's indispensable breadbasket, supplying grain to the capital. By seizing Carthage in 439 CE, they established a powerful and enduring kingdom and built a formidable fleet that would come to dominate the western Mediterranean, severing Rome's vital lifelines. As these piecemeal settlements and conquests by Germanic peoples continued to unfold within the empire's decaying framework, the Western Empire faced its most fearsome and utterly terrifying opponent, Attila the Hun. Having already ravaged the eastern provinces and inflicted crushing defeats upon imperial armies there, Attila turned his gaze westward, invading Gaul in 451 CE. Aetius, demonstrating his strategic genius, cobbled together an improbable coalition of remaining Roman forces and various Germanic federates, including the Visigoths, to confront the vast Hunnic army at the legendary Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, or Campus Moriacus. This desperate, bloody defense, though incredibly costly, successfully halted Attila's seemingly unstoppable advance in Gaul, preserving what was left of Roman order. The following year, Attila invaded Italy itself, spreading terror and destruction. Rome seemed utterly doomed until an embassy led by Pope Leo I somehow persuaded the Hun to withdraw. While later, more pious accounts would attribute this remarkable withdrawal to divine intervention, more practical factors likely included widespread disease within Attila's army, severe food shortages in the already ravaged Italian peninsula, and possibly even substantial bribes discreetly offered by Constantinople. Attila's sudden death shortly after this campaign, and the subsequent rapid collapse of Hunnic power, granted Rome a brief, much-needed respite. That same year, however, the familiar specter of court intrigue led to the tragic murder of Aetius himself, orchestrated by a suspicious and paranoid Emperor Valentinian III. The emperor, in turn, was assassinated by Aetius' loyal supporters just months later, bringing a violent end to the Theodosian dynasty in the West. What followed was a dizzying and rapid succession of short-lived, often ephemeral emperors, many of whom were mere puppets manipulated by powerful Germanic military commanders. Majorian, who managed to rule for just a few years, 457 to 461 CE, represented the last serious and genuinely talented attempt to restore meaningful Roman power in the West. His valiant efforts to rebuild the military and recover North Africa from the Vandals, however, ended in his defeat and eventual execution, sealing the fate of the imperial project. After Majorian, Western emperors effectively controlled little beyond Italy itself, with various Germanic kingdoms establishing de facto independence and sovereignty in the former provinces. In Spain, the Suebi controlled the northwest, while the powerful Visigoths steadily expanded their territory from Aquitaine. In Gaul, the Burgundians ruled the southeast, while the Franks gradually increased their power and influence in the north. Britain, abandoned by imperial forces decades earlier as resources were pulled back to defend the continent, had developed its own unique post-Roman society, increasingly shaped by successive waves of Anglo-Saxon settlers. By the later decades of the 5th century, the Western emperors had become largely irrelevant figureheads to most of the former provinces, their authority a mere phantom. Real power in Italy itself rested firmly with a succession of powerful military commanders. First Ricimer, then after his death, Gundobad, and finally Orestes. Orestes, in a final act of imperial theater, installed his young son Romulus as emperor in 475 CE, though the boy, famously nicknamed Augustulus, Little Augustus, exercised no actual authority whatsoever. Germanic troops in Italy, primarily drawn from the Skiran and Herulian tribes, demanded permanent land grants similar to those successfully negotiated by federates in other provinces. When Orestes defiantly refused their demands, they rallied en masse behind Odoacer, a charismatic German officer serving in the Roman military. Odoacer swiftly overthrew Orestes and deposed the child emperor Romulus in 476 CE, effectively ending the 1,229-year charade of imperial rule in the West. In a strikingly pragmatic and symbolic solution, Odoacer sent the imperial regalia, the crown, purple robe, and other symbols of power, to Emperor Zeno in Constantinople, explicitly signaling that a separate Western emperor was no longer necessary or desired. He requested and received the title of patrician, governing Italy nominally as Zeno's viceroy, but effectively as an independent, sovereign king. Romulus Augustulus, still a mere teenager, was permitted to retire to a lavish country estate near Naples with a generous pension. An unexpectedly merciful and dignified end for a deposed ruler, starkly contrasting with the brutal fates of many of his predecessors. This moment, the deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 CE, is traditionally, though somewhat arbitrarily, marked as the fall of Rome, or more accurately, the definitive end of the Western Roman Empire. Yet, for the countless people living through these momentous events, there was no dramatic, cataclysmic collapse, no sudden, apocalyptic end. Instead, it was a gradual, often imperceptible process of transformation. Many of the fundamental structures of Roman life, its laws, its administration, its infrastructure, continued under what was essentially new management. Germanic kings, eager to legitimize their rule, issued laws based on Roman models, maintained some form of tax system, and often wisely employed Roman administrators who possessed invaluable institutional knowledge. Several complex and interlocking factors contributed to the Western Empire's ultimate failure to withstand the relentless pressures that its Eastern counterpart successfully navigated. The West faced far more exposed and extensive land frontiers, making it particularly vulnerable to frequent and massive invasions. Its economy had been less urbanized, less commercial, and more agrarian than the East's, rendering it less resilient to disruption. Even in better times, the once wealthy and revenue-generating provinces of North Africa and parts of Gaul, which had long sustained Western finances, were permanently lost to the Vandals and Visigoths, creating a devastating spiral of declining resources and revenue. Western emperors also suffered from a profound deficit of legitimacy and stability compared to their Eastern colleagues. The constant civil wars, the rapid and violent turnover of rulers, and the repeated assassinations profoundly undermined public confidence in imperial authority, eroding any sense of continuity or security. After the shocking sack of Rome, the deep psychological foundation of the empire, the almost sacred belief in Rome's eternal destiny and invincibility, Roma Aeterna was severely, perhaps fatally, damaged in the West. Yet, even as direct imperial rule faded into the annals of history, Romanita's Roman culture, identity, and way of life remarkably endured. Latin remained the prestigious language of administration, legal scholarship, and literacy, forming the foundation of intellectual life for centuries to come. The nascent Catholic Church, rapidly expanding its influence, consciously preserved many Roman organizational structures, administrative hierarchies, and legal concepts, becoming a powerful institutional inheritor. Aqueducts, many dating back centuries, still carried fresh water to cities, and people still gathered in the familiar civic spaces of forums, even as new Germanic lords ruled from former imperial palaces, adapting and adopting the remnants of Roman grandeur. The end of the Western Empire did not, by any means, signify the end of the Roman world itself. In the East, the empire continued to flourish, anchored by its magnificent and impregnable capital at Constantinople. Emperor Zeno and his successors proudly considered themselves the sole legitimate rulers of the entire Roman world, including the lost western provinces that they harbored a tenacious hope of one day recovering. In Italy itself, Odoacer's rule, though initially successful, would prove brief. Emperor Zeno, wary of an independent Germanic power so close to the heart of the old empire, authorized Theodoric, the ambitious and capable king of the Ostrogoths, to invade Italy and depose Odoacer. After a protracted war, defeating and eventually treacherously murdering his rival, Theodoric established a powerful Ostrogothic kingdom that represented one of the most successful and sophisticated syntheses of Roman and Germanic elements in the post-imperial West, preserving much of Roman life under Gothic suzerainty. As the western provinces began their gradual, complex transformation into what would eventually become medieval Europe, the potent idea of Rome retained its powerful, almost mythical grip on the European imagination. Germanic kings, keen to legitimize their nascent power, sought recognition from Constantinople and coveted prestigious Roman titles. The Church, increasingly centralized and powerful, progressively filled the administrative and moral vacuum left by the imperial retreat, becoming a new kind of unifying force. And far to the east, the Roman Empire, though now predominantly Greek-speaking and staunchly Christian, but still proudly calling itself Roman, *Romeoi*, continued to uphold the magnificent legacy of Augustus and Constantine for another 1,000 years. The end of the Western Roman Empire thus marks not a cataclysmic, sudden collapse, but rather a profoundly significant transition point in a much longer, multifaceted process of transformation and adaptation. The political structure created by Augustus 5 centuries earlier had finally irrevocably failed in the West. But Roman civilization, like a great river dividing around an insurmountable obstacle, would continue flowing, carving out new channels and influencing the medieval world to come in countless, enduring ways. While the Western Roman Empire faded into history's pages, its eastern counterpart continued to not just survive, but often thrive, becoming a beacon of civilization. The citizens of this surviving realm never, in their own time, called themselves Byzantine, a term invented by modern historians to distinguish it from its Roman origins. They proudly identified as Romans, Romeoi in their increasingly Greek speech, the rightful inheritors of the grand legacies of Caesar and Constantine. For nearly a millennium after the deposition of Romulus Augustulus, this Eastern Roman Empire would diligently preserve, brilliantly transform, and actively transmit the rich legacy of Rome to future generations. As the 5th century drew to a close and the 6th century dawned, Emperor Zeno faced significant internal challenges. Deep-seated religious controversies over the precise nature of Christ divided Eastern Christians, fueling bitter theological disputes. Meanwhile, his Isaurian countrymen, from Zeno's mountainous homeland, dominated the court, breeding widespread resentment and outright hostility among Constantinople's sophisticated and often volatile urban population. Yet, despite these internal fissures, the empire remained remarkably intact, a model of statecraft with its highly efficient tax collection system, a professional and well-structured administration, and a robust military security apparatus that the fragmented West could only envy. Zeno's successor, Anastasius I, provided 27 years of truly capable and steady governance, 491 to 518 CE. His careful financial stewardship replenished the imperial treasury, leaving a surplus, while his ambitious construction of the Anastasian Walls, also known as the Long Walls, provided crucial additional protection for Constantinople's vital landward approaches, safeguarding the capital from barbarian incursions. Though religious tensions continued to simmer during his reign, Anastasius skillfully maintained the empire's strong position against Sassanid Persia, its traditional and formidable rival in the east, preventing any significant territorial losses. The true golden age of the Eastern Roman Empire, a period of breathtaking ambition and cultural efflorescence, arrived with the accession of Justinian I in 527 CE. Born to Latin-speaking peasants in the Balkan provinces, Justinian, a man of immense intellect and relentless drive, married the remarkable Theodora, a woman of extraordinary intelligence and willpower. Her journey from actress of questionable reputation to empress scandalized conservative circles, but she proved to be a shrewd, determined, and indispensable partner on the throne. Justinian's overarching ambition was nothing less than the audacious restoration of imperial unity, to reclaim the lost western half of the Roman Empire. He dispatched his brilliant general, Belisarius, to recover North Africa from the Vandals. Belisarius accomplished this mission with remarkable speed and efficiency in 533 to 534 CE, swiftly returning the wealthy, grain-producing region to imperial control and boosting imperial morale. Emboldened by this stunning success, Justinian authorized the even more ambitious invasion of Ostrogothic Italy. The Italian campaign, however, proved to be far more difficult and protracted than anticipated. What was planned as a swift reconquest became a devastating 20-year struggle, 535 to 554 CE, that utterly ravaged the peninsula, turning it into a wasteland. Though imperial forces eventually prevailed, capturing Ravenna and ultimately defeating the last Gothic resistance, the cost in blood and treasure was enormous. Italy, once the very heart of Roman power and civilization, lay economically ruined and depopulated. Parts of Spain were also recovered, but Justinian's grand dream of full Western restoration ultimately remained elusive and largely unfulfilled. These extensive military campaigns severely stretched imperial resources, already strained by intermittent but costly wars with Persia along the eastern frontier. The situation worsened dramatically when the bubonic plague, later known as the Plague of Justinian, reached Constantinople in 541 CE, killing perhaps 40% of the city's inhabitants and then spreading relentlessly throughout the entire Mediterranean basin. This demographic catastrophe dramatically reduced tax revenues and military recruitment, creating profound fiscal problems that would plague Justinian's successors for generations. Despite these immense challenges and setbacks, Justinian's reign witnessed truly remarkable achievements that cemented his legacy. The magnificent church of Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom, with its revolutionary and seemingly impossible dome spanning 108 feet, remains one of the world's most breathtaking architectural marvels, a testament to Roman engineering and artistic genius. Even more enduring, in terms of its lasting impact, was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive compilation, revision, and reform of Roman law completed between 529 and 534 CE. This monumental legal work meticulously preserved classical legal principles for future generations and systematically organized centuries of Roman legal precedent. This codified legal system would eventually form the fundamental basis of many European legal systems and represents one of Rome's most significant and enduring legacies to the modern world, shaping concepts of justice and governance globally. After Justinian's death in 565 CE, the empire entered a difficult and turbulent period. His successor, Justin II, almost immediately lost much of Italy to the Lombards, a new wave of Germanic invaders. Meanwhile, constant warfare with Persia continued to drain precious resources and manpower. Subsequent emperors, Tiberius II and Maurice, skillfully maintained imperial defenses and fought valiantly, but struggled desperately with diminishing resources and an increasingly overstretched empire. Maurice's ambitious attempts to reform and streamline the military, though necessary, led to his unpopular overthrow and brutal execution by the usurper Phocas in 602 CE, plunging the empire into chaos. The 7th century brought unprecedented and existential challenges to the empire. Under Shah Khosrow II, Sassanid Persia launched massive invasions, capturing Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia, threatening the very survival of the empire. Jerusalem fell in 614 CE, and the True Cross, the most sacred of Christian relics, was carried to the Persian capital as a triumphant trophy. Persian forces even reached the Bosporus itself, poised directly opposite Constantinople. In this moment of supreme crisis and near annihilation, there emerged one of Rome's greatest and most dynamic emperors, Heraclius. Having overthrown the tyrannical Phocas, Heraclius personally led the imperial counterattack, embodying the spirit of a warrior emperor. In a series of brilliant, daring campaigns, 622 to 628 CE, he drove deep into Persian territory, inflicting decisive defeats and ultimately forcing a peace treaty that restored all lost provinces and, crucially, the true cross. This stunning reversal of fortune appeared to permanently secure Rome's eastern frontier, marking a glorious triumph. Yet, even as Heraclius celebrated his extraordinary victory, a new and utterly transformative power was rapidly emerging in the Arabian desert. United by the Prophet Muhammad and inspired by the fervent new faith of Islam, Arab armies erupted into Roman and Persian territories with astonishing speed and irresistible force. The exhausted Persian Empire, weakened by years of war, collapsed entirely, while Roman forces suffered a crushing defeat at the decisive Battle of Yarmouk in 636 CE. Within a single decade, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, provinces that had been an integral part of the Roman Empire for over 6 centuries, fell under Islamic rule, marking a catastrophic loss of territory and revenue. This profound territorial loss fundamentally transformed the empire. The remaining realm became more compact, geographically centered on Constantinople, Western Asia Minor, Anatolia, and the southern Balkans. Greek definitively replaced Latin as the language of administration, law, and culture, while the empire took on a more explicitly and intensely Christian character. Modern historians often mark this dramatic 7th century transformation as the transition from the Eastern Roman to the Byzantine Empire. Though significantly, contemporaries themselves saw no such division, still proudly identifying as Romans. Despite these massive territorial losses and the existential threats, the empire adapted and remarkably survived. The ingenious theme system, reorganizing provinces into self-sufficient military districts where soldier farmers defended their own lands, proved an exceptionally effective response to constant Arab raids and invasions. Greek fire, a mysterious incendiary weapon that could burn even on water, gave imperial fleets a crucial and terrifying advantage in defending Constantinople and controlling the seas. When Arab forces besieged Constantinople itself on 2 separate occasions, 674 to 678 CE and 717 to 718 CE, the formidable, multi-layered defenses of the capital held firm, repelling the invaders. The failure of these epic sieges marked a critical turning point, preserving the empire as a Christian bulwark in the eastern Mediterranean and, by extension, arguably saving much of Europe from early Islamic conquest. The 8th and early 9th centuries brought bitter controversies over religious imagery, a period known as iconoclasm. Emperors from Leo III to Theophilus banned the veneration of icons, viewing them as dangerously close to idol worship and a form of idolatry. This divisive policy deeply split society and strained relations with Rome and other Western Christians, who continued to revere and use sacred images in their worship. The eventual restoration of icons in 843 CE healed these profound divisions and ushered in a vibrant period of cultural and intellectual revival. Under the Macedonian dynasty, founded by the energetic Basil I, 867 to 886 CE, the empire regained much of its lost strength and prestige. Agricultural production surged, cities revived, and military fortunes dramatically improved. Emperors like Nikephoros Phokas and John I Simoskos recaptured significant territories in Syria and the Near East, while Basil II, known chillingly as the Bulgar Slayer, earned his formidable sobriquet for his ruthless and effective campaigns that brought all of the Balkans back under imperial rule. This resurgent Rome, though distinctively Greek in language and culture, represented the most powerful, wealthy, and sophisticated society in the entire Christian world, a beacon of learning and splendor. Constantinople, with perhaps 500,000 inhabitants, dwarfed the modest and often struggling towns of Western Europe. Its bustling markets featured exotic goods from as far away as China and Scandinavia. Its magnificent churches gleamed with breathtaking mosaics, and its scholars diligently preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts unknown in the Latin West. Yet, beneath this glittering golden facade, structural weaknesses were slowly developing, like cracks in a magnificent edifice. The free peasantry, which had historically formed the backbone of the theme armies, gradually lost their lands to expanding aristocratic estates, weakening the military and creating social inequality. Civil service positions increasingly became hereditary rather than merit-based, leading to inefficiency and corruption. Religious differences with the Latin West widened and deepened, culminating in the Great Schism of 1054, which formally divided Christianity into Catholic and Orthodox branches, a rupture that persists to this day. The pivotal disaster, however, came at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 CE, where Seljuk Turks decisively defeated Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes and opened up Anatolia, the empire's heartland and main source of manpower and revenue, to Turkish settlement, a wound from which the empire would never fully recover. Simultaneously, Normans conquered the last remaining imperial possessions in Italy, and Pecheneg raided across the Danube, threatening the Balkan provinces. The empire that had seemed triumphant and invincible just decades earlier now fought desperately for its very survival on multiple fronts. The desperate appeal for Western aid by Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, 1081 to 1118 CE, inadvertently helped trigger the First Crusade. While Crusaders did establish fragile Latin states in the Holy Land, tensions between the Latins, Westerners, and Greeks, Byzantines, grew increasingly bitter, marked by mistrust and cultural misunderstanding. This animosity tragically culminated in the Fourth Crusade, which infamously and shamefully diverted from its original goal and sacked Constantinople itself in 1204 CE, plundering the greatest Christian city in the world and establishing a short-lived, deeply resented Latin empire on its ruins. Though imperial forces eventually recaptured Constantinople under Michael VIII Palaiologos in 1261 CE, the restored empire was but a pale shadow of its former self, a fragment of its past glory. Italian merchant republics like Venice and Genoa came to dominate its economy, while powerful Serbian and Bulgarian states carved away vast Balkan territories, further diminishing its reach. Most importantly, Turkish emirates controlled most of Anatolia, with the aggressive and rapidly expanding Ottoman state emerging as the greatest and most existential threat. The Ottoman Turks inexorably crossed into Europe, gradually encircling Constantinople. Despite desperate diplomatic efforts by Byzantine emperors to secure substantial Western aid, support proved minimal and often too late, hampered by religious differences and Western European preoccupations. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor, faced the massive Ottoman army of Sultan Mehmed II, consisting of tens of thousands of seasoned troops and formidable artillery, with only a few thousand defenders when the final siege began in April 1453. For 7 grueling weeks, the ancient, battle-scarred walls of Constantinople, a testament to Roman engineering, valiantly withstood the relentless Ottoman cannon fire. On May 29, the final, overwhelming assault broke through. Constantine XI, a figure of tragic heroism, allegedly threw off his imperial regalia and died fighting hand-to-hand alongside his soldiers as the city fell. Mehmed II, the conqueror, rode triumphantly to the Hagia Sophia, which was consecrated as a mosque that very same day. The Roman Empire, which had endured for an astonishing 1,480 years since the accession of Augustus, finally irrevocably ended. Yet its legacy lived on in myriad forms. The Ottoman sultans themselves, in a remarkable continuation of imperial aspiration, styled themselves as Caesars of Rome, Kaiser I Rum ruling much of the former Byzantine territory. Moscow, claiming the mantle of the Third Rome, positioned itself as the spiritual successor, preserving Orthodox Christianity and imperial traditions. Renaissance Italy rediscovered and revitalized classical texts preserved by Byzantine scholars who fled westward before and after Constantinople's fall, sparking a cultural rebirth. Most significantly, the Byzantine Empire had served as the crucial, indispensable bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. It meticulously preserved Roman law, Greek philosophy, and early Christian theology through centuries when these might otherwise have been lost to history, particularly during the turbulent Dark Ages of Western Europe. Its elaborate diplomacy, sophisticated bureaucracy, and complex economy provided invaluable models and influences far beyond its own borders. The epic story that began with Romulus on the Palatine Hill had finally concluded. But Rome, in its broadest sense, never truly fell. Transformed. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the subtle but pervasive echoes of Roman civilization continuing through the very laws we follow, the languages we speak, the buildings we admire, and countless other aspects of our modern world that would be utterly unrecognizable without the enduring and profound legacy of Rome. Though the last emperor bearing the title of Caesar fell with Constantinople in 1453, Rome's influence reverberates through the centuries, shaping our present day in fundamental ways. As you drift closer to sleep, let us reflect deeply on the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization that shaped our world in countless, often unseen ways. Perhaps Rome's most significant and far-reaching contribution lies in the complex and foundational realm of law and governance. The Romans developed a uniquely sophisticated legal system that moved far beyond the limited, often arbitrary scope of earlier, more primitive codes, to address the increasingly complex and nuanced needs of a diverse, cosmopolitan, and rapidly expanding society. Concepts that we now take for granted as fundamental to justice, the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, the crucial importance of intent in determining criminal acts, the clear and vital distinction between civil and criminal law, all bear indelible Roman fingerprints, refined and codified by their brilliant jurists. Justinian's great legal compilation, the Corpus Juris Civilis, body of civil law, meticulously preserved these enlightened principles through the often turbulent medieval period and transmitted them intact into the modern era, forming a continuous chain of legal thought. When European nations began to develop their modern legal systems in the late medieval and early modern periods, they drew heavily and consciously on this rich Roman inheritance, often adopting its structures and principles wholesale. Today, the civil law tradition, which profoundly governs most of continental Europe, Latin America, and significant parts of Africa and Asia, derives directly and fundamentally from these Roman models, a direct lineage across millennia. Even the common law tradition of England and its former colonies, while developing separately with its own unique characteristics, demonstrably absorbed and integrated many Roman concepts, influencing its evolution. Beyond specific legal provisions, Rome pioneered innovative practices of public administration that would profoundly influence the organization and efficiency of later states and governments. The Romans meticulously created a professional civil service, a groundbreaking innovation, establishing clear hierarchies and roles. They developed systematic record-keeping, ensuring continuity and accountability, along with standardized weights and measures that facilitated trade and commerce across vast distances. Regular censuses were conducted for purposes of taxation and military recruitment, providing crucial demographic data, and they devised sophisticated tax systems that, while often burdensome, were remarkably effective in funding a vast empire. While these innovations might seem mundane or merely bureaucratic to a modern observer, they formed the essential, often invisible infrastructure that allowed complex societies and large-scale states to function effectively and endure for centuries. The very idea of citizenship, understood as a formal legal status conferring both defined rights and clear responsibilities, owes an immense debt to Roman practice. Rome's gradual, though often strategic, extension of citizenship to conquered peoples offered a powerful and effective path to integration, fostering loyalty and helping to sustain the empire for centuries, turning former enemies into stakeholders. This model of earned inclusion, though imperfectly implemented and often a tool of Roman power, provided a stark alternative to the strict ethnic exclusivity and tribalism that characterized many ancient states, offering a vision of a multi-ethnic, multicultural political community. In the transformative realm of language and literature, Rome's profound impact remains inescapable and pervasive. Latin, originally the humble speech of rustic farmers on the Tiber's banks, miraculously transformed into the lingua franca, the common language of Western civilization for over a millennium, serving as the language of learning, government, and the church. Though no longer widely spoken as a first language, Latin's vibrant descendants, the Romance languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian, are native tongues for nearly 1 billion people today, a living testament to Rome's linguistic reach. Even languages not directly descended from Latin, such as English, bear its indelible influence through centuries of borrowing and cultural exchange. English, though Germanic in its basic grammatical structure and core vocabulary, derives roughly 60% of its vast vocabulary from Latin, either directly or indirectly through its profound influence on Old French, which in turn contributed massively to English. Scientific, legal, and technical terminology throughout the world, from medicine to philosophy, remains predominantly Latin-based, providing a common and precise vocabulary that transcends linguistic boundaries and facilitates global communication in specialized fields. Roman literature established enduring forms, genres, and universal themes that would resonate deeply and inspire subsequent Western literary tradition for centuries. Virgil's epic Aeneid, with its grand scope and profound themes of destiny and duty, became an essential touchstone for later poets, from Dante Alighieri in the medieval period to John Milton in the Renaissance, influencing their narrative structures and poetic aspirations. Ovid's inventive mythological narratives in the Metamorphoses, a dazzling tapestry of transformations, directly influenced the works of William Shakespeare and countless other writers, providing a rich source of classical allusion and storytelling techniques. Cicero's masterful rhetoric provided sophisticated models for political oratory and persuasive argument that shaped public discourse for millennia, emphasizing clarity, structure, and emotional appeal. While Seneca's philosophical works and powerful tragedies profoundly shaped Renaissance drama, focusing on themes of fate, virtue, and human suffering. The elegant letters of Pliny the Younger and the incisive histories of Tacitus continued to influence how we understand the purpose, methods, and ethical responsibilities of these genres, setting standards for historical inquiry and personal correspondence. The physical legacy of Rome, visible in enduring structures and ingenious engineering, remains equally impressive and awe-inspiring. Roman engineering transformed the Mediterranean landscape with an infrastructure network of unprecedented scale, sophistication, and durability. Many Roman roads, built with meticulous planning and solid construction, still form the basis of modern highways, their carefully planned routes proving remarkably optimal even with today's advanced technology. Aqueducts, built by Roman engineers with ingenious use of gravity and arches, continued to supply fresh water to cities like Segovia in Spain into the 20th century, a testament to their longevity and effectiveness. Roman architectural innovations, particularly their masterful refinement of the arch, the vault, and the dome, made possible buildings of colossal scale, permanence, and breathtaking interior spaces previously unimaginable in the ancient world. Their groundbreaking development and widespread use of concrete, a revolutionary building material, allowed for the construction of structures that have miraculously endured 2 millennia of earthquakes, floods, and warfare, resisting the ravages of time. The Pantheon in Rome, with its perfect, unreinforced concrete dome featuring an oculus open to the sky, remains one of the world's most astonishing architectural marvels, a beacon of engineering genius, inspiring buildings from the Renaissance to the present day. In military affairs, Rome's legacy is similarly profound and influential, shaping the art of war for centuries. The Roman legion, a flexible, professional fighting force combining heavy infantry with specialized units like cavalry and artillery, provided an unparalleled model that would influence armed forces and military organization for centuries. Roman emphasis on rigorous discipline, relentless training, sophisticated engineering, from siege works to bridge building, and meticulous logistics, supply lines, troop movements, rather than merely relying on raw courage or overwhelming numbers, set uncompromising standards that all later successful armies would strive to emulate. Military strategists and historians today still diligently study Caesar's brilliant campaigns as exemplars of strategic and tactical genius, analyzing his use of deception, speed, and combined arms. Rome's political legacy presents a more complex and nuanced picture, offering both inspiring ideals and cautionary tales. The Roman Republic, with its innovative system of checks and balances, its clear separation of powers among different branches of government, and its concept of term limits for elected officials, profoundly influenced the framers of many modern constitutions, particularly America's founders, who carefully studied its successes and failures. Yet, Rome also starkly demonstrated how even robust republican institutions could be gradually subverted by ambitious individuals leveraging personal charisma, wealth, and military power, and how the precious commodity of liberty might be willingly traded by a populace yearning for security and stability in times of crisis. The imperial system that ultimately replaced the republic similarly offered both positive and negative lessons for later generations of rulers and political thinkers. At its best, the Roman Empire provided remarkable good governance, relative peace, and tangible prosperity to diverse populations spread across 3 continents, creating a vast Pax Romana. At its worst, it starkly demonstrated the inherent dangers of autocracy, the corrupting influence of absolute power, and the immense, persistent challenges of maintaining unity, loyalty, and cohesion across vast territories encompassing widely different cultures, languages, and traditions. Christianity, the world's largest and most enduring religion, undeniably owes its phenomenal global dissemination to the Roman crucible in which it was forged. The early Christian movement, originating in a remote corner of the Roman Empire, shrewdly leveraged the very infrastructure of imperial power. Roman roads, meticulously engineered and maintained, along with the extensive network of Roman maritime routes, became vital arteries for missionaries like Paul to carry their revolutionary message across vast distances with unprecedented speed and efficiency. The highly organized urban centers of the empire, bustling with diverse populations and vibrant intellectual exchange, served as fertile ground for establishing nascent Christian communities, acting as hubs from which the faith could then radiate into surrounding regions. Beyond mere infrastructure, Constantine's momentous conversion fundamentally reshaped the trajectory of Christianity. What began as a persecuted sect transformed, gradually, into a favored religion, then eventually the official faith of the empire. This shift provided Christianity with an unparalleled organizational template, the imperial administrative framework. Ecclesiastical structures began to mirror the Roman state, with dioceses often corresponding to existing Roman provincial boundaries, establishing a hierarchical system that would endure for millennia. Most strikingly, the venerable title of Pontifex Maximus, once held by Roman emperors as the chief priest of the state religion, a symbol of ultimate spiritual and temporal authority, was eventually appropriated by the popes, solidifying their claim to a universal religious dominion that transcended political borders. Rome's intellectual and cultural grandeur wasn't solely defined by its original creations, but perhaps even more profoundly by its unmatched genius for synthesis, adaptation, and transmission. While Roman artists, philosophers, and scientists frequently drew inspiration from and adapted the sublime models of Greek civilization, they did so not merely as imitators, but as conservators and reinterpreters. In their meticulous study, translation, and practical application of Greek achievements, from engineering principles to philosophical treatises, the Romans inadvertently became the primary custodians and conduits, ensuring that the profound insights of classical Greek thought were preserved and subsequently passed on to later civilizations, particularly in the West. Indeed, without Rome acting as this crucial intermediary, much of the foundational classical Greek thought that underpins Western tradition, from the democratic ideals of Athens to the scientific inquiries of Alexandria, might well have been irrevocably lost to the ravages of time and the collapse of empires. The very idea of Rome, imbued with concepts of law, order, and universal dominion, proved to be an incredibly potent and enduring symbol, one that captivated and motivated leaders long after the literal empire had dissolved. Across the medieval and early modern periods, a continuous procession of political figures sought to don the Roman mantle, believing it lent legitimacy and grandeur to their own reigns. From Charlemagne's dramatic coronation as Roman emperor in 800, a conscious effort to revive the Western Empire, to the Eastern Roman, Byzantine rulers who steadfastly maintained their identity as direct successors of Rome, and the Russian Tsars who proclaimed Moscow the Third Rome as a claim to spiritual and political heritage, to the sprawling, multi-ethnic Habsburg Holy Roman Empire, all these endeavors unequivocally reflect Rome's deep and powerful symbolic legacy. Even in the 20th century, the dark specters of Nazi architecture and Mussolini's fascist imagery consciously and cynically evoked Roman imperial grandeur. Think of the monumental structures, the eagles, the fasces, showing the persistent, albeit sometimes grotesquely misused, power of Roman symbolism to inspire awe and assert authority. Perhaps Rome's most fundamental and transformative bequest to subsequent civilizations was its pioneering cosmopolitan vision. The revolutionary notion that diverse peoples could not only coexist but actively participate in a shared cultural and political community, all while retaining significant aspects of their distinct local identities. This unprecedented ideal, though certainly imperfectly realized in practice and often built upon conquest and coercion, laid the groundwork for future conceptions of universal citizenship and international law. This Roman ideal of a world unified under a common framework of law and shared citizenship, rather than perpetually fragmented by rigid ethnic or religious boundaries, continues to resonate as a powerful aspiration in our own increasingly interconnected and complex global society. Rome also stands as a stark testament to the full spectrum of human capability, demonstrating both the soaring heights humanity can achieve and the terrifying depths to which it can descend. It was the same civilization that birthed the profound wisdom and stoic philosophy of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, yet also bore witness to the grotesque excesses and depraved tyranny of Caligula. The society that conceived and constructed the awe-inspiring Pantheon, a marvel of architectural and engineering genius, was also the one that staged the brutal, blood-soaked gladiatorial games for mass entertainment. This profoundly complex and often contradictory legacy serves as a constant, sobering reminder that human achievements are invariably interwoven with human failings, and that civilization itself, in all its forms, is always a blend of the inspiring and the deeply flawed. As your thoughts begin to quiet and you fall deeper into sleep, take a moment to imagine how profoundly different our contemporary world would appear without the indelible and enduring influence of Rome. Our legal systems, which form the bedrock of so many modern states, would be radically different. Our languages, particularly the Romance languages but also English with its vast Latin vocabulary, would be unrecognizable. The very principles of our architecture and engineering, from the humble arch to monumental domes and vast road networks, carry the Roman imprint. Our political institutions, with their echoes of republics and senates, and our religious organizations, particularly the structural hierarchy of the Catholic Church, would all be profoundly transformed. From the most mundane details of daily life, such as the names of our months, to the most profound philosophical questions about citizenship, justice, and effective governance, Rome has intrinsically shaped how we understand ourselves and the intricate tapestry of our society. The Roman story, an epic narrative spanning more than 2 millennia from the mythical founding by Romulus to the poignant fall of Constantinople, offers a grand and sweeping saga of unparalleled human achievement, remarkable resilience in the face of adversity, and constant, often ingenious, adaptation. Through countless rises and falls, glorious triumphs and devastating disasters, the Roman world continually evolved, yet always managed to maintain vital connections to its rich and often tumultuous past. Even long after the Western Empire had ceased to exist as a viable political entity, its colossal shadow continued to loom large, influencing every subsequent development in European and Mediterranean history. As you drift off to sleep, find comfort in this profound continuity of human experience, understanding that while empires rise and fall, the essence of humanity endures. The very same stars that gazed down upon Emperor Augustus as he famously transformed Rome from a city of brick to one of marble now shine upon us. The same fundamental human hopes, the same deep-seated fears, and the same universal dreams that motivated the Romans in their relentless pursuit of security, prosperity, meaning, and beauty continue to motivate and drive us still. In that shared, timeless humanity, our common aspirations and struggles, lies, perhaps, Rome's most profound and everlasting legacy. A mirror reflecting the eternal human journey, its boundless potential, and its inherent paradoxes.